13th. I'm going to call to order the Winooski City Council meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First up is agenda review. Any issues with tonight's order of agenda? Okay. Next up is public comment. Public comment is for if you have something to say about anything not on tonight's agenda. If you are here for this evening's agenda, please wait for that item as we will have public comment time. Anyone here for public comment? All right, and online. We do have one online. Paul, if you could bring over Shanna.
Shauna, hi, yes.
Welcome.
Thank you. Yep. Do I address my public comment now?
Sure, yeah, please, if you could introduce yourself, your town of residence, and then feel free to speak.
Shauna Cullinane. I've been a resident of Winooski for about 5 years. And well, first I just wanted to start by thanking the city staff for all the additional comments on the budget through with online surveys. And I've just noticed recently an uptick in Front Porch Forum comments about the city sidewalks and the Main Street development. And for me, I've noticed that the sidewalks have just been really pretty bad. So I was just wondering if the council could continue to place budget priorities on improving these roads and the sidewalks. I've was walking with my mom recently, so she's been quite a bit older, and she fell a couple times, and so I just wanted to just address some of the maintenance needs that I feel like the city could put on just a little bit more emphasis on. But thank you so much for everything you've done for the city.
Thank you, Shauna. Appreciate it. All right. Any additional public comments? If you're online, you can use raise hand or chat. Okay. We'll move on to the consent agenda. We have our City Council and Liquor Control Board minutes from January 6th, the payroll warrant from December 22nd to January 4, accounts payable warrant for January 8th, appointment of the city manager to serve as ethics liaison, point of contact with the State Ethics Commission, and the annual Vermont Agency of Transportation mileage certification. Any questions, concerns about the consent agenda? Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Aurora, second by Charlie. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next up is council reports. Councilor Judge, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. I feel like since I've only seen you folks in the last 7 days, I don't have anything significant to report. I believe that we're a go for the joint council and planning commission meeting, and I'm sure you'll have more on that, Mayor. But that pretty well concludes my update.
Thank you, Charlie. Housing and planning, to be clear, not council.
Thank you, sorry.
Of course, of course. Deputy Mayor.
My commissions also have not met since we all met last. However, an update in that Safe Healthy Connected People was supposed to be meeting or originally scheduled to meet tomorrow. However, due to city staff covering different vacancies, we're not going to be meeting tomorrow. We'll be meeting on the 28th instead. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilor Oakleaf.
I do not have any updates at this time.
Thank you. Councilor Bird.
I also have no additional updates.
I will just share that Joint Housing and Planning Commission meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, January 22nd, and Planning Commission's regular meeting is Thursday, January 23rd. The Regional Planning Commission will be joining to share updates on the land use map update requirements from Act 181 that was passed last year. We'll move on to city updates. Elaine.
Yep, so tonight continues the fiscal year 2026 staff budget presentations. Please stick around for the public safety presentation to learn more about police, dispatch, fire prevention, code enforcement, and more. For the full schedule of budget meetings and information, please visit winooskivt.gov/FY26, that's F as in fiscal. City Hall will be closed on Monday, January 20th for Martin Luther King Jr. Day, but the final budget vote will occur during the City Council meeting on Tuesday, January 21st. Keep an eye out for the City and School Budget Community Dinner announcement. That's to be confirmed. It's tentatively for early February. And be sure to join us for the final budget presentation on Monday, March 3rd, 2025 at 6 p.m. at the Winooski School District in the Performing Arts Center. And lastly, January is National Blood Donor Month. Help save a life by joining us for the blood drive at the Winooski Senior Center. That's at 123 Barlow Street. That's this Friday, January 17th from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. To sign up, visit the news update section on our website at winooskivt.gov or call 1-800-RED-CROSS to schedule your appointment.
All right, thank you. We will move into our regular items. First up for discussion is the Downtown Winooski Annual Report. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you very much for having me. And I state my name for the record, yes?
Yeah.
Melissa Corbin with Downtown Winooski. And I think there's going to be a couple of slides up on the screen, maybe.
Paul, you on it?
Yep, just give me 2 seconds.
So the first couple minutes are going to be scripted because it's not anything that I do on a day-to-day basis. So I wanted to make sure that I wrote things out so I was communicating them properly, and then we can be a little bit more free form after the first 2 or 3 minutes. Great, thanks so much, Paul. So thank you for having me, and I am here to talk about Downtown Winooski, but I wanted to also talk about a statewide initiative, the Vermont Downtown Coalition, so that we can then talk about some national statistics and then move into Winooski specifically. So in 2024, I was appointed as the director of the Vermont Downtown Coalition, along with Tracy Lewis, who leads the Barry Partnership. This coalition is made up of the 24 designated downtown districts across the state and was started in collaboration with the Historic Preservation Trust of Vermont 3 years ago. In addition to the 2 directors, we employ a lobbyist who works to execute a legislative agenda for the coalition. Our downtowns are more than just business districts. They are Vermont's economic and cultural heart. Last year, our downtown programs catalyzed just over $100 million in private investment and public funding, creating 295 full-time and 177 part-time jobs. These vital spaces are key to attracting young families, retaining our workforce, and preserving Vermont's unique character and high quality of life. However, our downtowns are facing unprecedented challenges: the acute housing crisis, workforce shortages, the impacts of climate change, particularly flooding, shifts in consumer behavior post-pandemic, all pose significant risks to the stability of our community hubs. To address these pressing issues and build on the success we've already achieved, we created the following for our 2025 legislative policy agenda. Base funding of $625,000 for Vermont's designated downtowns. This includes $25,000 for each downtown organization and a coordinating role at the state. $5 million for the Downtown and Village Center Tax Credit Program, which has been instrumental in revitalizing community centers while preserving their historic character and improving building safety. $500,000 for the Better Places Program, which provides matching grants from $5,000 to $40,000 for placemaking projects that enhance the vitality of our downtowns and village centers. And support legislation that enhances our community's public safety and addresses critical flood response and infrastructure needs. In 2024, Winooski became the 4th Vermont downtown to achieve a national level of excellence for operations as a Main Street America accredited organization. Main Street America was founded in 1980 as a program of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Over the past 40 years, the MSA network has helped to generate over $100 billion in local reinvestment, rehab 335,000 buildings, create 782,000 new jobs, and start 175,000 new businesses in over 2,000 communities. Main Street executive directors are often the only full-time paid staff member at their organization. It is a demanding role that often requires a schedule beyond the typical 9 to 5 hours. It is also a relationship-driven job that demands a level of emotional commitment and passion that can lead to burnout. Research has shown that nonprofit jobs take a disproportionate toll on women's mental and physical health. In Vermont, 83% of executive directors are women, and 79% are paid less than the national average salary. Only 13% offer paid parental leave, and only 50% offer medical benefits. As part of the Vermont Downtown Coalition, my role is to work towards succession planning and sustainable financial solutions for the directors that lead this work. As we have seen firsthand in our community, turnover is rampant, and without consistent leadership, the sustainability of an organization is at risk. With Main Street America accreditation, Winooski now has access to national resources to assist with financial planning, and as part of my role with the Vermont Downtown Coalition, I can share these tools statewide. So I'm done with my prepared reading. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Well, I just appreciate you sharing about that. I had heard about your role with the coalition, but did not know in any detail their function. And I think there's some alignment in some of the asks that you're making of legislators to what council is, and that we could also get behind, you know, these specific funding requests that you're making as well.
Great, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. We're working with Nekrasen Group, which in my opinion is one of the best lobbying institutions in the state. So they've been really, really great. They're the ones that helped us secure that $625,000 for the first time 2 years ago. And so that $25,000 of funding supplements funding that we get from the city and from private donors and businesses. So.
Of course, yeah. Did any other counselors have questions before Melissa moves on? Okay.
Okay, so the next slide or document, I just wanted to talk about the sponsorship cultivation that I've been doing this past year. So sponsorship dollars for our events and general fund are up 139% from what they were a year ago. And so these are some of the logos of the businesses locally that have been very, very supportive of downtown Winooski. I'd like to call out Winooski Organics specifically as our largest sponsor. They are a presenting sponsor for our Downtown Block Party series as well as our farmers markets. And we have now, I built a donor database this past year. We now have 187 consistent people donating to the organization, anywhere from $5 to $5,000. And so everyone's now receiving a letter at the end of the year acknowledging their donation and support of the organization as well. So I feel like it's one step further in the direction of finding financial stability for the organization. And that leads us into the next slide, which is the event series that we did this past year. Most of you would have received a document like this in your mailbox, but we used this as an annual appeal letter to go out to existing donors and potential new donors as well. We had over 7,000 people attend our events this year, and I was really hoping that text was going to be a little bit larger, but I think it's $245,500 went to local vendors at our farmers market this year. Attendance was up consistently. Our largest market last year had 750 people attend it. Our smallest market had 1,000 this year. So we are now considered one of Vermont's larger and most successful farmers markets. So it felt really great for us to be able to support all of those local farmers and retailers, small business entrepreneurs. Unfortunately, the winter farmers market was not extremely successful. We tried it at the senior center this year, and we really saw very similar numbers to what we did at the O'Brien Community Center last year. So we are likely not going to be moving forward with a winter's farmers market in the future, but my board has not made that decision yet. It's just the recommendation of the staff at downtown Winooski. We had our Juneteenth celebration, which was very, very successful this year. On Sunday afternoons, we welcomed a DJ dance party in Rotary Park. We, I believe, supported 90 DJs throughout the summer that don't necessarily otherwise have a place where they can display their talent, because that market, as I understand it, I'm still learning about it, there's a lot more DJs than there are venues for them to play at. So it was nice to be able to support local artists doing that work. French Heritage Day has always been a really popular one. That had over 1,000 attendees. We did a youth vendor day at our farmers market. We tried an onion fest, which was not super successful. Fiber Fair was very successful. And our July and August block parties were, in my opinion, not necessarily worth the amount of effort that went into them. And we're going to possibly try to do them on days different than Wednesdays to see if we can get more attendance from families. We brought back Best Pooch in the Noosk, which has always been a community favorite, and it's been gone for a few years, and we had, I think, 39 dogs entered into the contest, and also very well attended. And our holiday pop-up was extremely successful again this year. We were able to support a lot more vendors than we were the year before and the year before that. I think this is the 10th year that that's been running. And I think those are the highlights of the event season. Does anybody have any questions or comments related to that?
Bryn?
Hey, Melissa, I'm so psyched to see this call to action page with pledges. Hearing about the database for sponsors is really awesome. So just really psyched to see all the work that you're doing. I was curious with the winter's farmers market, if you thought about reconnecting with Four Quarters. I know we were kind of dueling last year with winter farmers market at OCC, and then Four Quarters was also having it, and it looks like they discontinued this year. If we're also discontinuing our farmers market, I wonder if it's feasible to coordinate with them to bring it back, or just collaborate on efforts.
That's a really great comment. And actually, I have a meeting with their new taproom manager and one of their owners. I believe it's next week. So I will definitely bring that up.
And then I was also curious, you didn't include on here or mention on here Blingo, and I was curious what the success rate was for that. It seems like it's been discontinued.
So unfortunately, the person that was doing the emceeing for Blingo had some serious health issues this year, and so we put it on pause for a few months. But hopefully, Craig will heal and we can bring it back this spring. That's the hope. So thanks for calling that out. And financially, it's not super successful, but it is bringing community members together, and it's a lot of fun. So we would love to see it come back again. I mean, the people coming out and just awesome outfits, and it was a really good time. So unfortunately, we had to hit pause, but we hope to bring it back this spring.
And I met with some of our senior residents within the last week or so that really miss bingo being offered at the senior center. In absence of that being something the city offers or runs, I wonder if that's something that I don't have any idea what the logistics are or effort for Lyft would be to launch that again. But something a little different than Blingo, different audience, different venue, likely. But just thought I'd mention that since I do know it's something that many of our senior residents do miss.
I know, Thomas, you had mentioned that as well. That's part of the reason how this idea came to fruition in the first place. So I will definitely bring that. Our board meeting is this week to go over plans for events for this coming season. So I will bring up that idea to them.
Great, thanks so much.
Mm-hmm.
We could also target communications to the senior community, make sure they're aware.
Mm-hmm. And we did have a good handful of seniors that did come out, I would say, on a pretty consistent basis. Once it got cold, though, that changed a little bit. But
Anyone else? Okay.
okay, so
Sorry, I forgot to raise my hand. I just wanted to, it's on this flyer, but Melissa, you didn't mention it, but and as we all know, but just for the public, all of these events are presented to residents and anyone else who wants to come for free. There's no charge at the door to get in. I just think that's something that is really important to mention because, a lot of the work that Melissa's doing is making sure that can be a free event. I was in Portsmouth, New Hampshire over the summer and had to miss one of our events. I think it was the French Heritage Day, and they had an event down there that was similar actually, and there was a charge at the door, and you still had to pay for food and everything once you got in. So it was just a real reminder of how downtown Winooski is trying to make sure that these events are accessible and available to anybody, and that there's no barrier to getting into it, and that we don't see that everywhere. So just wanted to highlight that, as you did, Melissa, because it is very important in what you do.
thank you so much for mentioning that. Yeah, one of the statistics that's on the screen there that we can't see because the writing's so tiny. I think it's $42,500 that I raised in order to make sure that those events were free to the community. So, and we try to do free food when we can. The sponsorship packages that we created at the beginning of last year, each one of them has a food sponsor as an option. So, great. And I guess the last slide is just a highlight of our strategic planning process. I sent, the city manager sent our complete strategic plan out in the council packet. That was like 10 or 12 pages, so I just wanted to distill it down onto one slide here. In the spring of 2024, our board of directors got together with a strategic planning consultant who took us through a full day of brainstorming over in Waterworks, and we had, the typical strategic planning process, lots of large Post-it notes and, markers, and came up with a lot of really great ideas. And so I don't need to go through what all of these bullets are because they look very, very typical strategic plan stuff. But I did want to just highlight the fact that we took the time as a board to work with a consultant and spend, I think it was just under $5,000 to work with them in order to create a plan for the next 3 years. That this is part of getting the Main Street America accreditation, is demonstrating the fact that we have a strategic plan and that it is a very healthy and realistic strategic plan. So if anybody wants to see the full-blown thing, we can send that out. But these are the highlights, these 5 areas: stabilizing and increasing organizational capacity, implementing systems and operations, ensuring sustainability and financial stability, strengthening our mission programming, and exploring, what's that last word, bottom word? Evolve, thank you, to represent Winooski's community. So if anybody has any questions or wants to delve more deeply into it, we can, but those are the highlighting areas.
Bryn?
Yeah, just a quick question about the strategic plan. Do you have, I know this is relatively new, is there like a timeline, like this is a 1-year, 3-year, 5-year strategic plan?
Yeah, so it is a 3-year strategic plan, and in the council packet, there's a table that's got the goals, the strategies, and then at the last column, it's the timeline. It'll show you what quarter of which year each one of those goals is being tackled. So it didn't really translate. It was going to be even smaller print, and so I didn't add that information in there, but you do have that in your packet.
Yeah, thank you. So 3 years out, so it'll bring us like 27, 28. I'm already thinking, as many already are, about the bridge replacement project, and just thinking ahead of what we can do to prepare ourselves planning-wise for events and support when that work begins in 3 to 4 years or so. But I know that's already on your mind, but I was curious about how that may factor into the strategic plan.
Well, it's important to highlight that because a lot of the work that I've been doing with the city manager this fall has been trying to explore different types of support services for the 6 years of 6 years of construction in total, but 5 left that we have. And have you made this announcement, or is it okay?
You mean the marketing? Yep.
You have told everyone. So we did secure $25,000 and are going to be working with a marketing firm to develop a plan for how we're going to tackle surviving and keeping our businesses alive during this time. So don't have an answer for it right now, but hopefully
Yeah.
will soon.
Great, thanks.
Aurora?
I have 2 brief items. One of them is just kind of more of a shout out. Looking through the strategic plan, one of the items you have on here is improve/ensure retention of staff, which is very important. And one of the ways listed is explore, like when more sustainable is more staff, or when sustainable is better wages for existing staff. And I just wanted to call that out as something that kind of wish more folks would use as a model. So appreciate that kind of forethought, both from you all and from the consultant that you were working with. And then the question I have is, I noticed there have been, there was some references in these notes and in the slides that you showed, kind of using an onion for Winooski, and just wanted to clarify on that, because I felt like as a whole we were moving away from using onion as it was a mistranslation, or have you all had different feedback on that? So just kind of curious about that particular branding.
No, that's a great question. And the strategic plan was done this past spring, and I think the clarity around that branding happened after that plan was written. So
Okay.
duly noted.
Okay, thank you. That was my one question.
Yeah, and in my opening statements, these stats were staggering to me. 83% of executive directors are women, and 79% are paid less than the national average salary. I mean, it's just not acceptable. So it's a big priority for me. Succession planning and sustainability to prevent staff turnover is essential.
Any other council questions? Any questions from members of the public, either on Zoom or in the room? We do have a public comment on Zoom. Welcome, Jackie.
Hi, Christine. Thank you so much. I just wanted to echo, I am a volunteer on downtown Winooski and wanted to be here tonight to support Melissa. The results speak for themselves, and I just want to say thank you so much to her for her leadership, for her community building in Winooski. We're really grateful to have her, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's sweet, Jackie. Thank you.
And just for the public record, we invite you here annually to give us an update on the organization, as there's public funding involved, and we work so closely together. And I know when you came into this role, as council, we were discussing the financial sustainability, having more clear goals and metrics, et cetera, and you've clearly demonstrated all of that here. So I really enjoyed hearing how you are thinking strategically about what events to do, how they perform, whether to continue, and what things need to evolve.
It felt a little, I needed to have 2 years of doing these events to really have the data and understand and make informed decisions about how much staff time goes into and how many people are benefiting from and whether we should shift and pivot. So thank you for acknowledging that. I also wanted to mention that I did send financial documents out to council members ahead of this meeting. It was very, like an hour or two ahead of the meeting, so you probably haven't had time to absorb them all. The 2025 budget should be getting passed by my board on Wednesday, so if there's any specific questions about anything in those financial documents, please feel free to reach out to me. And I also wanted to mention that in this past year, we did go back all the way to 2016 with reconciled financial reports, so that was a big lift this year too.
Great, thank you.
Such a short sentence to describe months and months of pain.
18 months, yeah. Yeah, well, we try to focus on the positive stuff, right? Things are fairly cleaned up. I just want to see if there's anything, and speaking of that, everything that needs to be in the hands of the IRS is now in the hands of the IRS.
Great.
They came back with us with a couple of questions in December. We had to change a box check here and sign somewhere else here, and they should have everything now in place, which was also a really major lift.
No timeline, right?
What's that?
No timeline on the status though, right?
No timeline on the status. The only I did finally get a person on the phone in December, and they said that we have not been assigned a case manager to tie a bow on everything yet, even though we submitted everything in May. They're that far behind.
Yeah.
So,
Great. Well, you're making progress.
doing the best we can, and now we just have to sit and wait. So, is there any other questions or comments, or is there anything that I missed that I should be mentioning? No?
I don't think so. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Okay. We'll move on to item B, also on for discussion, the management of Memorial Park with Winooski Valley Parks District.
Lauren, can I come up to you?
I guess so.
Okay, give me a moment to do a quick screen share.
Sure.
Great. How's that look? Good for folks at home? Perfect. So thanks for the opportunity to come back tonight and talk. We were hoping to do this last week as part of our budget presentation, but obviously with our partners here being triple booked, we were gracious enough to give them a week, and I think it worked out well. So tonight really wanted to come together and focus on the conversation we've had over the last few years about Memorial Park and prospective path forward on management of that park. We are not here tonight asking for a formal decision, but I think looking for, number one, trying to answer some questions that we feel like we've been hearing over the course of these conversations, and then number two, trying to get, I think, a head nod to see, is somebody moving the...
It's on automatic, I guess.
Weird. All right. I didn't know if Paul was doing that. Yeah, and I think number two, trying to get a head nod on this is a direction we should continue as staff to explore, move towards some draft documentation. I think at this point we've been very much in an exploration conversation and looking at ways that this might work. As I mentioned at a meeting a few months ago, recently tried to decouple the conversation around our dues and our kind of underpayment of dues from this Memorial Park conversation, because I think those two were really muddling the conversation, and it was hard to kind of figure out kind of chicken or egg. And I think this is us taking the chicken and the egg and talking about each separately, and hoping that at some point they come together in a way that's a little bit more thoughtful. So with that, I'm going to see if I can get my computer to comply here. Stand by. Huh.
I think because you hit resume, it went back where you were.
Yeah. I'm not sure. It's not letting me, unfortunately, not letting me go backwards.
Oh.
Right, the left and right arrows on your keypad.
Yeah, that's what I'm hitting. As Paul well knows, this computer is having a moment. All right. I'm going to try to reopen this. Paul does not. I'm going to try it as a PDF.
That's why I sent you.
Yeah. Thank you for the patience. All right. Can we work with this? Everybody sees that?
Can hit Control L and it'll be full screen.
Control L.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you can X out all tools.
Mad at you.
Yeah, I did hit control. There we go. All right. Whew. Thank you. We made it. All right. So want to introduce partners at the table here. So Nick Warner and Lauren Ducote, familiar faces here, but Nick's the director. Lauren is the operations manager and a Winooski resident as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nick. I can kind of drive the slides here and chime in where need be, but.
Sure. I had some back and forth with Ray today, sort of understanding questions were being asked, and I realized that some city councilors are more familiar with us and some are less familiar with us. So we essentially work for you guys. So this is a process by which we are evaluating a parcel of land to see if it makes sense for the Park District to own and manage, but there is no foregone conclusion, and I'm going to explain a little bit how the process works in terms of decision making. So, oh, I'm sorry. I should know better by now, don't you think? So go ahead and just start right through that.
All right.
Thanks. Sorry about that. As you know, we're a regional district, and we have 8 communities in our system, including Winooski. And just, all of our 18 properties are all conservation properties, and they're all protected either through a conservation easement or some form of deed restriction and/or agreements with landowners. So we do not own land that has not been evaluated for its value as conservation land, and when we acquire it, by the time we get to that finish line, all the decisions around its permanent protection have been made, and that's really a key thing. So we don't take properties on spec. It's actually quite an excruciating process sometimes to figure it out. Go ahead and keep going. This is a really interesting image. If you go onto the Nature Conservancy's webpage and you look up the water quality blueprint, they have a statewide evaluation of conservation lands. And the better context is if you zoomed out to the whole state and saw how much dark red is in this corner of the state. The conservation values of the lower Winooski corridor are huge. And Winooski, especially around Cassavant and also Memorial, but that whole stretch is very highly rated from a conservation standpoint. This is just a quick list, which of course you can't see very well, but this is a map of our park system and our properties and acreages. And all of these properties we own in fee simple, we don't carry any debt, and they all have some form of easement to protect them. And they're all managed for passive recreation and conservation. So that, I just want to sort of set the table with that. So where we are right now is, when I started this job 10 years ago, which is hard to believe, Winooski was in a very different situation, and we were in a very different situation, and I feel quite good about, over the years, we've built up our relationship. We've done quite a few projects together in the field. We've done a lot of education and event work. And we've always felt that was very important to build a relationship and understand what the city's needs and desires were. Originally, we looked at Cassavant, and for a bunch of reasons, it became clear that Memorial might be a better site for us to focus on as a potential park. The reason we feel it's important is Winooski, even though you're a long-standing member of this system, you don't have any of our parks within your borders. You used to. We used to lease Cassavant from the city of Winooski for many, many years. And that lease actually demised before I came on board, and it really was around growing pains with Winooski, trying to figure out what was next, what the extended development was going to be near Cassavant. There were a lot of question marks. So when I came in, things were pretty dormant, and with Ray and previous leadership here and current leadership, we've really worked hard to build up the relationship and do it with open eyes. I think it's a good way to look at it. But we've had we've had a good couple of years, especially doing upgrades and doing a lot of volunteer work, including our staff and other volunteers in the community, and really getting an understanding of what the property is and how it works and who's going there and what the potential uses are. And the city did a very smart thing. They got Red Start Environmental to come in and do an initial look at the park, and they very rightly understood that the amount of invasive plants down there is quite substantial, but they also saw the recreation potential and gave us a really good baseline and some numbers and some really good mapping to understand. If you go to the next, there's a couple of the maps that they put together, and that'll give you a sense of what Memorial is. And you can see the angled line going into Colchester. An important part of this project is we are working with CHT that owns the Morehouse Drive property on the Colchester side. It's actually, I think, in Winooski and Colchester. And they would very much like to work with us on the park. There's already trails that go across that line. No one sees the Colchester line in the woods. So we feel pretty confident that we can work with them and come up with some easements and legal agreements if the park goes forward. Go ahead. This goes back to the process. So when a property is seen as a potential to come into our system, we have an analysis that we do in-house that we are only partially through. It's a long way of saying feasibility and due diligence. We look at the feasibility of the park, looking at the ecological values, we look at the impact of the tax base, we look on transportation, we look at safety, we look at cost of maintenance, we look at the local political attitude towards it, we look at connectivity to other areas, habitat, it goes on and on and on. And to get to that finish line, we do what's called a natural resource assessment of the property. Red Start actually gave us a head start on that, but we'll do a more detailed one that really it takes a deep dive into the ecological values of the property. It's a fascinating site. The level of diversity in that small area, and it's also partially floodplain, and it's also incredibly archaeologically rich. So any management plan down there would certainly not want to tinker with any kind of excavation. And so this, on the left, is just a document that we use to guide that process. And the next page, I believe, is a continuation of that, or maybe not. Oh, okay. So if Memorial was to become a park district park, a couple things. just understand that when, Winooski already has co-ownership of our 18 properties. You have a very capable trustee in our board, and Bridget has equal sway with the other 7 trustees in making decisions on how we manage the system. So part of what you already have as a member of the Park District is control over our assets. And the trustees meet monthly, and they are deeply involved, and it's something that's frankly the staff depends on, and it's a really great, diverse group. From a practical standpoint, at some point the property would be transferred to us, but before that would happen, we do all the feasibility, all the due diligence, consult with the community, come up with a draft master plan, and at some point we'd need to decide how the property would be protected, and that would be in consultation with the city. Typically, we work with a third-party land trust that comes in and does we have to create a management plan that meets the needs of a conservation easement. They put a draft easement together, and we come up with a legal document that protects the property. And those easements, for those not familiar with them, the powers that they're held by a third party, so that if the Park District decided that they want to do something different with the property, we can't. That's the whole point of it. And it also gives us a whole universe of expertise in the land trusts, which becomes very important when you get down to the point of actually planning the park. We'll have to, before we get to that point, we're going to want to make sure we understand where CHT is going to work with us or not work with us, but we're feeling it's been a great interaction so far. We'd also want to be confident that we could acquire the funding and the materials and so forth to put the park together. I gotta say, so far, we feel fairly strongly that this is a good possibility, but we are not, to be very clear, we're not here asking for any decision. It's too soon. And I was just chatting with Ray. You go into these things knowing that there could be a point where it makes no sense. So we really try to, the due diligence and feasibility are real. They really dictate, because our motivation is conservation and public access. So there's no financial incentive for us to, in fact, it's just the opposite. We take on a property, it means more burden to the organization. So it's a big decision. So I think that, and I was just trying to hope to, for those who don't understand how we operate, I was just trying to clarify that.
Yep. And I think just to say a few words too, those pieces, conservation and public access, I think align very much with what we heard from the community in the Parks and Open Space Plan as desires for Memorial Park. So I think that's also part of why we've really been, feeling good about moving forward on the diligence side with Park District as a partner. I think those goals align very much with what we were kind of instructed by the community to do with that parcel. So it feels like a good partnership in that regard.
And it's the conservation business, but it's a development activity. It's all the same things that go into developing is what you're doing with the park. And just as 2 examples of recent projects, one is Deerway Cove, which is, if you go to the end of North Ave Extension in Burlington, there's a former marina that we purchased in 2018 and used FEMA money and other sources to demolish and completely renaturalize the site. And that's a riverfront property, so that's a good example. And currently we're working with the town of Williston and Global Foundries on a 29-acre parcel. They are Global Foundries. I can say this publicly because they've been great. We haven't done the legal documentation yet, but they're going to donate a parking lot and a trail easement to us so that we can have a permanent public access. It takes years sometimes, and that's what we're in the business of doing. So that's what the value that Winooski has been getting already is. All the way through, you've had representation on our board, which has been hugely valuable, as in it just brings a whole different dynamic to the board, having all the different talents there.
So I think that is a table set for questions.
Yep.
Well, I will say, I think when this came about last year, you mentioned like the decoupling of the dues piece with this process, to my recollection, our other concern was around engaging the community in a discussion around kind of losing ownership of this parcel. So I'm pleased to see that called out here, that there would be a community engagement process before finalizing a plan. And also that you've already been doing some work with CHT. I also personally would say, when this first came up, one of my thoughts was like, what is the priority here? Like, people enjoy this natural area. What's the purpose of spending more money and time on addressing it? And I think reading the management plan in depth shows me that the goal is still to retain it as basically a natural area, but make it a little more accessible. So
Yes.
I do think it was helpful to see this.
Yes.
My primary questions are on like timeline, financial impact. I think those are all next step, pending how council feels about this today. So we'll turn it to see who on council has questions.
I'm gonna stop sharing so we can see everybody's faces.
Aurora?
Yeah, I have two questions. The first is around, do you have any, or have you considered, especially with this property, having any trails that are specifically can be wheelchair accessible?
It's a good question. So we have not done trail planning to the level that would include that yet. It is definitely called out in the parks plan. So as we move forward and do trail development work, that's definitely going to be on the radar. I don't know offhand how feasible that is at Memorial Park. I will say most of those trails are relatively flat. So I think from a rise and run perspective, it's probably a parcel that could have potential. But I also think there's the archaeological component there is complicating as well, in that digging down is not really something you can do. So I think that's something as we get into it, either we or Park District, whomever is kind of driving that bus, would likely engage someone like on your team, someone like Tim who has trail building experience, or if it were us doing it, it would be a consultant that would come in and help us kind of decide what makes sense. And is it the full network? Is it you're getting access to a view shed or a certain location within the park? I think those are all things we'd have to factor in as we think about that.
Can I just add it's a priority of the Park District for us to start evaluating our system on a whole for accessibility. So that is very much something that we're aware of, and we're starting that process a little bit more to look at our other parks that we currently own and manage and how we can make even small sections of them more accessible across the board. So definitely would be something we would consider in the process with Memorial Park as well.
Awesome. Thank you. That's very good to hear. My one other question is actually about the archaeological significance. Could you give an example of kind of what it looks like to, I guess, do some of that work? Like, are you engaging archaeologists to come look at the land? Is
Great
it
questions.
trying to
Yeah.
preserve?
We would not need to engage an archaeologist unless we were doing excavation. In which case, yes, you would. I think any time you put a shovel in the ground along the Winooski riverfront, it is one of the most incredibly archaeologically rich areas in the Northeast. I mean, it's astonishing. Everything that we do in our city, and we have actually quite a bit of property that has archaeological sensitivity, and we don't excavate. And so as long as we don't do that, but you bring up a great point about accessibility. Maybe we do have to put helical piers in for a boardwalk or something, and in that case, you would engage an archaeologist, or you get a consulting archaeologist to come in and do an evaluation. Worst case scenario, you do a phase 2 site assessment, which I've participated in before, which is actually, if you have the money to do it, is quite fascinating. And then you really know where you can and can't go. But we just assume that every square inch of that property has just got an insane amount of history subsurface.
And there's a really thorough report from the state. It's definitely at least 20 years old at this point. But we've also, in my time since being here, engaged with a state archaeologist a number of times to do site walks. We did an interpretive walk there a number of years ago. They've been on site to kind of point out, oh, we're thinking about moving this trail here or there. So we have engaged them over time, and I think, like Nick said, if there were any more, invasive type projects on the horizon, that's when we would bring someone in to do some more formal evaluation.
It also gets triggered if we happen to get a federal grant. Sometimes it just automatically triggers it, and sometimes you end up with an archaeologist you didn't plan to have in the first place, and that's fine because it's all part of the process. So there are other sort of stopgaps that make sure that the archaeology is protected, but our attitude is we know it's there and we embrace that, and so great questions.
Wonderful. So would that be a partnership with the state or really depend on?
It would depend. I
the
mean, I could
project?
see, I'm guessing that we probably will not have to engage an archaeologist to complete a trail plan there, because frankly, most of the trails are already in place, or we wouldn't have to excavate or move a lot of material. But I could definitely see, especially as it stabilizes as a public park and less of a sort of a question mark open space, it's more inviting for archaeological study, and you're going to see a lot of archaeological study over the next 20, 30 years as the technology for recognizing subsurface it's gone through the roof. So I could envision in a couple of years, we get the park going and it's safer and it's a better place. You feel more comfortable taking a busload of kids. I mean, I think there's a lot of possibility for study down there.
And interpretive signage
Yes.
could be put in place that sort of describes it's what has been there that the state already knows about too. So that's definitely something that we think about as we think about developing a park, is like what educational and interpretive information we can put out that is significant to that site, which that would very much be highlighted for Memorial.
Wonderful, thank you. And thinking about that signage, sorry, just having different languages as part of that too,
Yes.
including Abenaki.
Yep, and just as a reminder too, as part of our land acknowledgement, there's some specific language around the trail naming hierarchy there and the park name at some point being reconsidered. So those are still very much on the radar and would be part of any conversations with the park district moving forward.
Wonderful, thank you.
Bryn?
I have a lot of questions, so I'm gonna hand it over to Thomas.
Thomas first. You're on mute still.
Too many buttons, gotta put the hand down and mute. So, looked really great, thank you. Very, very interesting, and I think, we've talked about this a little bit before, and I think my general, question and thought before, it really moves you forward, is I just wonder what, we're looking at for costs, and I know the mayor kind of highlighted that a little bit earlier and said that was down the line, but I think you said you were looking for nods of approval maybe, but not anything official, as this is just discussion. I think that does play into getting to that point, given other budgetary considerations. I don't know if we've ever got to that question in the past, versus what it costs for the city to maintain that property versus a fee that we would pay to you all to maintain it, but I would like to, doesn't have to be right now, but I would like to find that out at some point as we continue to dive into this exploration.
To be clear, the fee is the fee you're already paying. So the way it works, this is like, okay, I'm going to sell us a little bit here. So what we do is we leverage resources and we get power in numbers. So the fee that you're already paying the park district, which is a related but somewhat separate topic, that's it. That's how we're not going to come and ask you for more money in the piece of land. The way the dynamic works is we figure out if we can get the resources to do the park and if it makes sense for us to maintain it on behalf of you, who we work for. If it makes sense, and we come back to this body, and it makes sense with you, it makes sense with our trustees, and with whatever land trust we work with, you don't pay us money, we do a transfer of land with a document that says the Park District has to do what they're supposed to do, and if not, you can have a reversionary clause and take the land back. So if the parcel ends up in our hands, we will go out and leverage funding to do the work to improve the parcel and manage it. So that's how the system is supposed to work.
I would say, I think the financial question is, I assume we would come to a point of renegotiating on where we're at with the dues, because we've been making a step up every year. So the question for me down the line would be, can we continue that path? Do we need to increase the step up, or do we need to come to full dues right away? I think that's where the financial impact question sits, which we don't need to answer at this moment.
But I think as a frame of reference, perhaps, and kick me if I'm wrong, but I think the cap on what the financial impact would be is the delta between what we are paying now and full dues.
Yes.
So to give you a ballpark, that's the range we're talking about, which I believe at this point is 12,000.
It's 23 and we're paying 12, I think.
It's $11,000-$12,000 difference. So I think that's the max number you would be looking at to kind of put it in a ballpark.
Thomas, does that answer your question?
It does answer my question, thank you.
Okay. Bryn, do you want to go, or?
I'll let Aurora go.
Okay.
Mine is a very quick follow-up. In the Winooski Valley Parks District draft management plan, there is the note of picking or harvesting plants is not allowed. I assume or I would hope that would be changed to be in compliance with our land acknowledgement and land use rights.
Yes, that's right, because you have a policy of, to be clear, that is an issue that we're all grappling with, balancing, because it's not a few people taking plants. We have people with garbage bags that come in and clean out entire areas. So it's a fiddlehead specifically. And so we grapple with that. I mean, there's no place to land that feels good, because if we say that in our literature, but the whole foraging thing has really taken off in the last few years. So it's really come around. But whatever, we operate in the towns that we operate in. And if the town insists that is the policy, we would make that change. That's not a problem. But I'm just saying that it's difficult, and it's difficult for the gatherers too, because some people want to gather enough to sustain, and then others go out there and clean out entire patches. So it's harvesting. It's not just foraging. That's been an issue for us.
Well, I think our policy is only for folks of Native American descent.
Correct.
Like, not just anyone.
Mhm.
All right, Bryn, go for it.
Thank you. All right. I sent a number of questions ahead of time. I'd say that I do not have enough information to make a comfortable decision on this. I don't feel like I've gotten enough of a convincing breadth of detail to feel like I'm comfortable moving forward with this particular plan at this specific time. I think we haven't really considered what alternatives there are. I have questions about why Memorial Park. It sounds like we had a relationship with Winooski Valley Parks District for Casabat, so when will staff come back and say that we need to explore handing that parcel off again? I asked some constituents in the last 2 months about the park. A lot of folks love it. I definitely agree with that. I agree that it needs work and ongoing maintenance. When I asked folks how they felt about paying more to cover the costs, they were not supportive of doing that. I'm not comfortable also moving forward without rezoning the parcel as a natural area. I know that I've received a response as to why we may not want to do that, but for me, I would not be comfortable without having that rezoned personally. So I, just to kind of give a high-level overview that I have a lot of questions that I don't feel like I have sufficient answers for at this time.
That's because we're in the feasibility stage. So I appreciate you. We're actually in the same spot you are. We're not here prepared to say we think that it's time for us to push to try take possession of this parcel, and none of us are. So I actually very much agree with where you're at. We have more work to do. And to be clear, I do want to just, I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just want to emphasize that it certainly has nothing to do with what you and staff have worked on thus far. I just think that I need more information. I think there's a number of different ways of getting the maintenance that we need, and I don't know that all of those options have been explored.
Mm-hmm. No, that's fair. I don't know if you got responses, Bryn. We did get questions earlier today. I think quickly to the zoning question, that's definitely something that is called out in the Parks and Open Space Plan as a future priority, is looking at the zoning of our natural areas. Given the really low development potential on that parcel, it has not been a high priority item. And so I think if that's something that council feels like we need to move ahead with and start to prioritize it differently, I think it's very much something we can do. It just hasn't been on that list of priorities for us the last few years. So it's not I hear you that might be a first step that we want to explore. Again, it just hasn't risen the priority list.
Yeah, I've seen things move quickly in the city when it's important, and to me, it's important.
Yeah.
Bryn, did you have a chance to review the answers yet? I only sent them very shortly before the meeting.
I've been reviewing them during this presentation.
Okay.
So if there's further clarification that we need to provide, let us know, because that's our best effort at this point.
And you understand that, you were talking about asking someone if they're willing to pay additional money. I just want to emphasize that your dues, your annual dues to the Park District is all that we're ever planning on asking for. Mm-hmm. That supports our operations, whereby we go out and we find other resources to do the work that we need to do.
I appreciate you mentioning that, because I feel like that's not the impression I walked away with when you presented to council in November, December. My impression was that it was baseline dues and then additional fees in addition to those dues.
Oh, I feel horrible if I gave that.
No, I mean, I think, and yeah, if that was misspoken, that was not the intent. I think the only thing on top of that would be if there's like contract work in other parks that are not managed by the Park District, that potentially would have a financial ramification. But if Memorial Park were under Park District management, we wouldn't then be contracting them to do maintenance work there. That would be part of the management.
I can see why that confusion.
So
yeah.
I think we would continue to have the Park District as a partner. So say Gilbrook, we have a trail project we want to do and we need some labor. That might be a contract above and beyond the dues that we would have Park District come in and work on a contract basis for, but not on a park that they are managing. So hopefully that clarifies.
I also don't feel like I have clarity around the other parcels owned by the city that are along the river now. When are we going to anticipate being asked for property transfers for those other parcels? Why not, if that's the direction we're heading, why not think holistically about it rather than piecemeal?
Sure. I mean, I think the main reason, I'll speak for myself, in kind of moving with a focus on Memorial Park is that it's a pretty discreet, small space. I think it's a good test kitchen for this relationship and this type of agreement. Cassavant is a much higher profile, much busier, has a lot of different types of use potentials than Memorial does. I think Memorial kind of is what it is, right? It's a natural area, super sensitive trail network. I think that's what it will be. I think
And it
Cassavant.
also has archaeological value as well.
What's that?
That also has archaeological value as well.
At Cassavant, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think Cassavant too has the meadow, which has some event-based potential, which we've talked about at points in the past. I think the relationship to downtown and some of the development there is a slightly different beast. And so I think that's, for me at least, why Memorial has felt like a good starting point to the conversation. And I will say it's not necessarily a starting point with an end goal of a conversation on Cassavant. Do we get there down the road? Maybe. But it's not a like sneak one in and try to sneak a second one behind it. That's not at all the intent. Memorial is a park we have not been able to keep our arms around from a management perspective. And so this is us trying to look at some options.
Okay, thanks, Ray.
Yeah.
And I just want to emphasize, any of you are welcome to attend one of our board meetings. And that might be a great way to, even just listening in to how they operate and the level of detail that they're involved with, I think might be helpful.
Any questions from members of the public in the room or on Zoom? Judy, please join us. Do you want to come up to this mic?
Wanna come up?
You guys can stay right there.
Here. Oh,
Just move that nameplate.
Oh, yeah. That's not you.
No. Okay. My name's Judy Lance, and you may recall, Nick, that I had some concerns when this was presented. Maybe it was about a year ago, because it was at that point that I realized that the term maintenance or management agreement did not mean management, it meant ownership by you folks. And that disturbed me, that was the first time that I understood that, and I was certain that most other people in Winooski would not understand the term management meant transfer of ownership. I've reconciled with that at this point, because it's been pretty obvious to me that the city has not, that is an incredible site for a number of reasons, and the city just doesn't have the wherewithal to do what needs to be done there. And I think improvements should be made to the trail system and the signage and the information boards, and it would be great to have access to the river there at some point for canoes and kayaks and so forth. In reading the documents that were linked with the agenda that I got online, everybody got online, there was mention of, in Red Start's report, I think, about all the invasive species that are in there, and really pervasive, I
Yes.
think. That would be something that you think you could get somebody to work on? I mean, given all the archaeological sensitivity?
that's a good point. I mean, we think from a practical standpoint, we'd have to get a grant and we'd have to get a contractor for the first cut. It's just, it's pretty overwhelming. We've been in there a number of times with volunteers and equipment and weed whackers and brush hogs and we've made a dent, but it's pretty substantial.
Yeah, that was obvious.
Yeah.
I've only been in there one time this fall, and
Yes.
it was pretty obvious. Another thing that I read in the reports was that you don't police what there are rules, but you don't do the policing. And that would either come to probably our local police department, I don't know, which would be a burden on our police department, I think. So how do we ensure that people aren't camping in there, aren't doing things that they're not supposed to do without, I mean, it's not a direct expense necessarily to the city, but if we're going to do it right, somebody would have to be spending some time doing that.
Yeah, and it's a team effort, definitely, between our park superintendent and local service providers. And we don't just go right to the police, we actually
Right.
get to know the people who are camping there, and we try to find services, and we try to make sure that they're not just leaving the park, that they're actually going in. And it's been challenging, especially this last couple of years.
Yeah. Well, then I thought about other things like, apparently bikes are allowed in on there on the trails, some of the trails now. And I can see people going in there with dirt bikes and, whatever, that I don't think would be allowed. But somebody's got to deal with that. So it's just another consideration that no matter what we do in there, we need to be thinking about that kind of thing. I think those were my main issues, but I really would like to see something, a plan be put in place, a management plan go in place, whether it's Winooski Valley Park District or some other entity, because I think it's an amazing site.
Yeah.
And it deserves more care than we've been able to give it. Okay, that's
Thank you, Judy.
Thanks.
Well, I will say, as I mentioned earlier, my two original concerns have been addressed. If we move forward with exploration, there's community engagement. There's the ability to have a revisionary clause to revert back ownership if that needs to be the case. And frankly, we have to pay you someday. I would like us to get there in the coming years. And I think getting this service for money we're going to be sending out the door eventually anyway is good. I personally would like to have a little leeway with how long it takes us to get to full payment, which we could revisit further in this process. So I would give a head nod to continuing to explore this and coming back to us. Would love to hear from other counselors.
Yeah, I would also give a head nod to continuing exploring. I think this would be a very valuable partnership.
And we appreciate the questions too, because those are exactly the questions that we're trying to deal with right now to figure it out. So keep them coming.
I don't have any questions, but I want to echo Aurora and the mayor. I know what land remediation costs and what land maintenance costs, and dollar for dollar, what we're getting out of this agreement and out of this partnership seems to way outlast what the city has the capacity to do at this point, not just in staff, but in budget. I think that the environmentalists among us shouldn't see an issue with this, especially given how valuable these sites are. And this nonprofit specializes in this type of stewardship, and I think that I can meet with them in good faith on the topic.
It's interesting that parking spaces are more important than street trees too. So, the environmentalists among us also appreciate having some good hindsight and a broader perspective as it comes into what the total options are for land management on this parcel. And I think that rezoning for me is a big factor into protecting this land into perpetuity. Just like the potential for the easement to come back to us if the agreement falls apart. I think rezoning could happen in the future if that were needed. But as we look at increasing our housing distribution across the city, I think it's just as important to protect our natural areas. So I would like to see rezoning as part of a more immediate near-term aspect that we take on as we pursue additional conversation with Winooski Valley Parks District. I also would be interested to see more details on where Colchester is with their timing and their plans. And I think that Winooski Valley Parks District is an asset, absolutely. I would like to see a more holistic plan in terms of if we don't have the capacity for this parcel, then what does that mean for our other parks along the river?
I'm just curious, Bryn, where is your distrust of the park districts? Where is that coming from? Because it doesn't sound to me like you think that they have our best interest at heart. I'm just curious as to where this obvious distrust comes from. Is there a history here, or I'm just curious?
Charlie, you know that in the last 2 years, I'm generally skeptical. I ask a lot of questions. I ask for a lot of details. I think for me, I'm not skeptical about Winooski Valley Parks District as a partner at all, and I hope that they don't feel that way. It is not by any means whether or not they're capable of maintaining the property, as I've been a patron of many of their parcels throughout the watershed. So it has nothing to do with that. I think for me, it's making sure that our city staff and our zoning is done very intentionally and very mindfully. So overall, I do support having improved management of the parcel. I just want to see more thought that goes into it and have my questions answered.
In fairness too, I also felt like we may have misled you the last presentation into thinking that we're going to ask you for more money. So that's how I interpreted your questions. Sorry, go ahead, Christine.
Well, I mean, you've got majority support to continue exploring.
Yes.
Was just going to see if, Thomas, you wanted to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you recognizing what you just did, because I left our last presentation, hence why my question was asking how much it was going to cost, because it seemed like there were going to be additional costs for us adding this park. So I appreciate you clarifying that today. You know, if this isn't taking up a significant amount of staff time, I'm fine, you know, with you all continuing this process and presenting your findings to us later, if it's something that's feasible for our staff, or it sounds like you're doing the majority of the work on the Park District side. So if you want to keep on doing that work, feel free.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Any other feedback that would be useful to you at the moment? Elaine?
Yes, I'd like clarification on whether to explore other partners.
I don't think that's necessary, given my previous statement about you being positioned to do this and us needing to pay for the dues anyway, eventually.
Sorry, and
Does anyone
also
disagree?
a holistic plan like Bryn was asking for. Yeah,
I also don't feel like that's a priority right now. That I agree with Ray's approach to focus on this parcel where it makes sense, rather than trying to do more work to look across all of our parks land.
Can I ask too, maybe just based on Brent's question about the zoning piece, just to get some clarity there? Because
Sure.
again, I hear you,
Please.
Brent. It's not that it is not a priority. It's just, as you well know, those lists are long. So I guess just looking to council to say too, like, is that a project we should be running in parallel first? I'm just looking for some clarity.
So
I
what
would
aren't
ask
we
if it's
doing?
necessary.
Well, yeah, I do, just from experience, I've learned in this business that zoning can be changed, but conservation easements are a hell of a lot more difficult to overturn. So that's why we have conservation easements in our lands. And we do have some lands that are still zoned as they used to be, but they have easements on them. And those are far more safe from future development than a change in zoning. I'm just throwing this at you because I'll give you more examples. It makes me think that I should give you more examples of what these easements look like and the language and so forth, and see if it's something that, because we would want you guys to support that if we're going to go with that road.
I would then say I don't feel like that's a priority still if the conservation easement is going to give us stronger protection. And then I would look to council for these last three statements I made to see if folks agree.
Yeah, I would be in agreement. We have the Parks and Open Space Master Plan. That's what we're working off of and what our partners are working off of too. So I feel like that is our larger document.
I think I saw a head nod from Thomas. Yeah. Charlie, okay. Okay. Good to go?
Excellent. Yes.
All right.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Questions.
Great questions.
All right. Time check, council. Do you want to take a break now or wait until after? Should we just move into budget presentation? Okay. All right. Let's move on to item C. The FY26 staff budget presentations for public safety. I think PD is first.
Paul, are you all set on your end? Good to go. All right.
Well, thank you, everybody, for having me here tonight. My name is Justin Heisinger. I'm the Chief of Police of the Winooski Police Department, and I have our FY26 budget presentation. Go ahead, Paul. So in this presentation, what we're going to outline is our organizational chart. We're going to review our foundation and focus. We include that slide every year for the last at least 3 years in the presentation. We'll go through our statistics, our district liaison officer update, community outreach team update, some caretaking stories, community outreach events, then general fund budget, and emerging issues. So our organizational chart right now, we have the chief of police, we have the 2 lieutenants. Those spots are both filled. We had a vacancy last year at this time, which was the chief of police, and obviously we made that transition. We backfilled from a sergeant's position to a lieutenant's position to make that position whole. On the other side of that, we have our dispatch supervisor and our 3 dispatchers underneath them, which are full-time. We have 2 part-time dispatchers. We are now full on the dispatcher side of things, which is good. We have our 3 sergeants positions, one of which is unfilled. We have 2 sergeants currently. We have a detective position and our 8 officers. All were filled at the time that we put this presentation together. We now have 1 vacancy. We have our new DLO and we have 1 on-call part-time police officer. So just to recap on the 21st century policing model that was presented by President Obama's task force, the 6 pillars that were identified with the best outcomes of policing are here: building trust, legitimacy, police and oversight, technology, social media, community policing, crime reduction, training, education, and officer wellness. So those are our foundation on how we're molding our police department now. So statistics. Any questions before we get into some stats?
Not seeing any.
What's that?
I'm not seeing any.
Okay. So these are our statistics from FY20 to FY25. We see, again, the decrease in overall call volume, which we're going to talk about a little bit on the next couple of slides. FY25, we're starting to trend back upwards. Not really sure why. We haven't been able to identify why yet, but it does look like we're projected for FY25 to be higher than what we were in FY24. Paul? So our top 10 calls for service are here. Our traffic incidents, which are our accidents and traffic stops, that sort of stuff. Suspicious events, public assist, agency assist, mental health calls, 911 hang-up calls, informational calls, welfare checks, directed patrols, and noise complaints.
Before we move from this, does anyone need a description of what these call types mean? These are standard, so we don't change them, but some of them might not be obvious to folks.
Bryn?
Where would animal concern and related issues fall?
Good question. We have a call designation for that in Valcor, so it would pop up as animal complaint.
So it's not listed on here.
It's not in the top 10.
Great, that answers the question.
So again, on the call volume going down, drilling down on some of that stuff, we are spending more time on specific calls for service. These calls for service that we've listed here are calls that take a significant amount of time. Our mental health, welfare checks, those take a significant amount of time, sometimes hours. If there's an incident where an officers are dealing with a mental health crisis after hours, that can sometimes take 8 to 10 hours of officer time to get a result on that call. Same thing with welfare checks. They can take a tremendous amount of time. So when you have 2 officers on, and a call like this comes in, oftentimes that's one call for service that's generated in a 20-hour span of officers calling the road. So I think that's part of the reason why we're seeing a decrease in overall call volume, although we're trending to go up a little bit this coming year, is we are spending more time on each individual calls, specifically these calls. Again, we have our mental health calls, welfare checks, larcenies, assaults. Our motor vehicle thefts are up significantly to 33 in 1 year. Burglaries, suicide attempts, again, those calls all take an extreme amount of officer time.
And if I could interject, Justin.
Sure.
So when the chief said mental health after hours, it's because community outreach isn't on. Is that right?
Community outreach isn't on in certain times after hours and on the weekends. And if it's an incident where we have to collaborate with First Call, depending on how that incident goes, if it requires any type of paperwork that's got to go to the court system, again, that takes an extended period of time for just one call for service. You know, if we didn't have a call for service like this, you know, our 2 officers that are on shift could go out and do motor vehicle enforcement. They could go out and do directed patrols and really generate that call volume, as opposed to dealing with this. Obviously, this takes priority and is more important. So I think, again, the decrease in call volume is related to the significant time spent on calls for service such as these.
And again, as a reminder for anyone listening, community outreach are social workers or trained social workers. So we do understand that mental health calls are better handled by people trained to take those and support such folks. But if they're not if they're not available because it's after hours, then it does still fall on police, because somebody does have to respond to help that person.
Any questions on that? Paul, do you want to go ahead and skip to the next slide? I think these are out of order. So again, the serious calls for service, we've had a response that we put together with that. We have our youth organized crime team that we put together. That is a county-wide team that's composed of not just law enforcement, but also DCF, the Howard Center, and representatives from the state's attorney's office, kind of collaborating on what we can do to drive this stat down, and not only respond to crime that's happening, but also identify, you know, areas where we can improve, and identify, you know, people that are in this demographic that are struggling a little bit, to funnel them resources to try to get ahead of the crime that's could potentially happen. Our gun violence task force, we do have a representative in that in-house. That's a task force that's put together by the ATF, and again made up of different law enforcement agencies within the community at the federal and state level. And that was a response that happened from the gun violence that peaked particularly in Burlington a couple of years ago. We have an officer that's a part-time detective with Homeland Security Task Force focusing on narcotics and human trafficking. We're going to talk about that in the previous slide. And then we've begun recently to engage with community members. We have had meetings with downtown Winooski, and then also other community-oriented public safety meetings that we're having, just to get input and feedback on what members of the community are seeing and what their concerns are and where they want to focus our efforts. So, Paul, if you could go back to that, thanks. So on the heels of that, Homeland Security detective that we have working with the drug interdiction side of things, these are some of the seizures that we've had in this last year. Again, we had a similar slide to this last year. So a significant amount of narcotics that we're taking off the street. Last year, we had a significant decrease in the overdoses that we saw. This year, we're back up again a little bit. We're almost twice the rate as what we were in FY24 at this time. Not really sure why we're seeing that, but it's concerning. So, our transition from our school resource officers to our district liaison officer. After 25 years of policing, 7 years at the school, Jason Zeiter retired from full-time police services. He's still on as part-time with us, filling a shift here and there. But as he transitioned out of that role, we transitioned into the district liaison officer role. And Paul, go ahead. And that's where we have Saja, so I'm going to turn it over to her.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Saja Amagali. I am the new district liaison officer. I've started roughly a month ago. I've been a police officer for a little over a year now. I'm just new to the Winooski community. I'm not very familiar with the community, so please welcome me. My part as a district liaison officer is a little bit different than a school resource officer. I am not mainly based in school. I am in school basically whenever I'm needed. I still be here at the department and will just respond to school whenever I'm needed. I work with staff at DCF and really anyone that is in the school that requires somewhat of a police presence and response, but not necessarily to the point that is, outrageous. Then that's when I come and step in to just kind of fill in that law enforcement gaps that needed to be there. But other than that, I really don't do much there. That is what's the difference between a district liaison officer and an SRO. I'm not basically a full-time SRO at the school. I really like it so far, and I enjoy having to, see kids in the morning and get to, make sure that the community and the students are getting what they need. I grew up somewhat in Burlington, went to UVM. Well, I started at Burlington High School, went to UVM, and now I'm still student at Champlain, getting a master's degree. Have a lot of siblings. You probably will see a lot of them here and there. Have 2 dogs, German Shepherds, and that's it. Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and please ask any questions.
Welcome, and thanks
you.
for coming in to meet with us.
Thank you.
Appreciate the note about you being new to the community. We'll do some thinking about if there's folks to introduce you to.
Thank you.
Did anyone on council want to follow up on any questions for our new DLO?
Not right now, just welcome.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Out of the hot seat.
So community caretaking, going to transition a little bit to our community outreach team here. This is their slide that they provided for us. They were a total of 325 calls for service in Winooski last year, and that's up compared to the previous year. But this is the breakdown of the calls for service that they had. Obviously, the big piece of the pie there is the primary concern is mental health. There's 10% of the calls that they went on were calls that we went with them, a mutual response. 24% of the calls were initiated by us, which I think is pretty indicative of how well that program is doing. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think if you scroll back to when community outreach team first started, you would have seen a much higher percentage of calls that were initiated by police departments, where now I say only 24% of the calls are initiated by police departments. I think that's a pretty good sign that people are utilizing that service without having to go through police to get to that service. So again, the calls for service for community outreach went up this year compared to last year. We accounted for 7% the previous year. This year we've accounted for 14% of the calls. And this is a more thorough breakdown. If you can scroll down a little bit, Paul.
Unfortunately, there's not people in the school.
Okay. I think we might be able to get it on the next slide. Yeah. So the breakdown in the, yeah, we can work with this, I think. The breakdown of the funding for community outreach as a whole has changed, and that's based on a new statewide model from the Department of Mental Health. You can see our contribution has gone up significantly to the community outreach team. We were paying $18,832 for the service. Now, based on the new funding model, that's at $60,000, and that was based on a tier model that the Howard Center had put together based on usage. Was there anything other than usage that went into that model, Elaine?
No.
I think it was based on usage.
Clarifying question. The number on here, 41,000, the number in our previous presentation and budget option tool is 31,000?
Angela, do you have the
Yeah.
an answer to that? Was it me?
I never saw that, Mayor, that number. Is Angela on?
1 second, I'm pulling up the budget tool to see what got keyed in. $31,000 is in there, but there was an anticipated escalator that had been in. We can change that to be the full amount, specifically directly related to Howard Center.
I'm not following on the escalator statement, Angela.
The contract that they had in place before did increase annually, so we had been budgeting for some sort of increase, just not the amount that was requested.
Oh, okay. So you had reduced the 41,000 because you already had some increase to their services in the budget.
I believe so. I can double check and see if there was something else that went into that, but that is my belief at the moment.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on that?
Not seeing any.
Okay. So what we've been up to, some success stories. Officers responded this year to a person in narcotics-induced crisis who was carrying a sword on Main Street. We were able to successfully de-escalate that person and place them into custody and deliver services to them without incident. Feel really good about where we're at as a whole as far as our response to de-escalation and mental health crises. We responded to a convenience store parking lot for a person who was unconscious in the driver's seat of a vehicle. The vehicle was found to be in gear. We had to gently pin the vehicle to prevent it from moving. The person was unconscious. Officers had to break a window to gain access to the vehicle and provide Narcan and life-saving measures to that person. One of the things that we're very proud of that's happened in the last 12 months has been our response to the recent bank robberies that happened in the area. We had 2 investigators that were kind of assigned to those. One was specifically here in Winooski. Our officers worked long hours and did a great job being the lead detective on 2 of those suspects that were ultimately apprehended. So kudos to our crew for that. Other significant cases that we worked on this year, we had 2 shootings, 2 stabbings, and 2 arsons. We had another successful CPR this year that we're happy about. Again, multiple Narcan deployments that is working very well. We're super fortunate to have Narcan and the availability of that. De-escalation tactics and our use of force models and how we train are working significantly. Our use of force incidents are down 34%. Use of force and how it's described is anytime we have to do anything other than non-compliant handcuffing. So anything above compliant handcuffing would be considered a use of force incident, and again, those are down 34% since 2019. Again, we collaborate with community outreach almost daily at this point, it feels like, connecting with vulnerable residents and services and resources. Questions on that?
It's very exciting on the de-escalation.
It's very
front.
excited on the de-escalation, yes. Paul? So some of our community outreach events, we've started to do some of these again. We've done a few this year. Coffee with a Cop, we still haven't been able to do that. We are working with one for the Dismas House and Our Lady of Providence. We're hoping to get that going again. We did do one block party this year. We were active in Special Olympics again. That's something we've done for a very long time, raising money through t-shirt sales, and then ultimately participating in the torch run. The Mindful Mentors, not so much the Mindful Mentors portion of it, but Officer Zeiter, when he was here last year, did do an after-school athletic league. We're going to see how that transitions with the new position of the DLO. The public safety camp did happen this summer. That again was very popular, with a lot of kids attending that. We did do our Senior Citizen Appreciation Day, and we did do fire cuffs. So some of the community outreach things that, you know, kind of got rolled back, we're really starting to try to get back into, and we're almost there with all of them. Questions on that?
And this was despite being shorthanded for most of last year and before that.
Yes. Yep. So our accomplishments to date for FY25, we've transitioned, like we talked about, from the SRO position to the DLO position. We're going to continue efforts to recruit and hire employees to better represent our community that we serve. We're anticipating one open in the near future. When we put this slide together, again, we were full staff. We are now down one. So we're going to be back into that recruiting mode. And not only recruiting, but we really need to put a focus on retaining our employees. There's, again, not just a Vermont thing, but a national thing as far as a shortage for officers. So it's hard to recruit and it's hard to retain. We talked about the new internal recruiting position that we established last year. We're just getting them going again this year, so hopefully that will be more successful and we'll see more applicants going forward. Again, we made this slide when we were fully staffed. We were fully staffed for the first time in a long time. We're hoping to get back to that position. We had 2 officers that recently graduated from the police academy. They're in their final phase of training. That's their field training that they're completing now. We expect to see them on the road in the beginning of February, middle of February. So that'll be a huge lift to our patrol division. Our staff right now consists of 30% of our employees that identify as female and 26% that identify as BIPOC. So we're doing our work and we're getting there as far as creating a department that really resembles the community that we serve. Continued focus on professional development for both our union and non-union positions. Just always trying to stay ahead of retirements, always trying to stay ahead of promotions. We really want to try to get into a system where we're training people for the position that they are going to have, not training them for the position that we put them in. So staying ahead of that with training is something that we're trying to do. We are in the process of implementing cruiser cameras to complement our body cameras. I think this has been some time coming. We finally decided to make that addition, and we're going to be moving forward with that. Hopefully installs will be within FY26. We'll see those installed and operational.
Before you go too far down that, so I wanted to mention that when in the first year that I was here, I had a meeting with the staff of the police department without the chief at the time, at their kind of mutual agreement. And they wanted to have a chance to air their concerns about the department and morale and the issues that they saw, without the chief in the room with the new city manager. And they talked about like the feeling of that they were stagnant and that they didn't have opportunities to grow because, just resources and so forth. So one of the things that I appreciate Justin's been able to do since he started is he's created opportunities for growth and movement without necessarily expending a lot more resources. Just like for example, the recruitment position or, more time with the narcotics teams. That sort of thing is like he's been able to create, like refresh the feeling of the department. So that's been a great sign of leadership from the new chief.
Thank you. The building, we put RFPs out for the Winooski Police Department building renovation. We landed on Bread Loaf Construction, which is out of Middlebury, that have done multiple projects within Chittenden County to kind of head the design process of that renovation. And then again, with our meetings that we've had with downtown Winooski and certain meetings that we've had based on individual areas within the city, we're going to continue our conversations with community members just to really get a good feel as far as what their expectations are of police services, where they feel we should expend our resources, and just again having more community input on how we police.
I would add, just for the public record, beyond that sort of more formal engagement, I know that you and members of your team also have smaller neighborhood meetings from time to time when folks are requesting it due to concerns.
Okay.
Just so to broaden where you're getting input on priorities.
Okay.
Yeah, and if anyone watching this has a concern about their neighborhood and think nothing's being done, I encourage you to reach out to us to ask for a meeting with the police department. One or two representatives will go because often they are doing a lot behind the scenes that can't be public, but that they can provide more hints about in an informal setting with it, like a neighborhood meeting.
So our FY26 goals, provide support to our new DLO position and really reform that position and how that works with our school. Again, recruiting and retaining employees is a big part of what we need to do and what we have to focus on going forward. We do have some anticipated retirements within the next 24 months. Going back to a slide that we shared last year, and I think I have it further on, it really takes 12 to 18 months to get somebody that's applying to a police department and then seeing that end result where they're actually taking calls for service. So trying to stay ahead of that curve is crucial. Continue to train officers above the current acceptable standard. Right now, the standard from the academy is 30 hours of training. We're really trying to focus on going above and beyond that, specifically when it comes to mental health and de-escalation, and then also career development. Again, training people and officers to the position that they're ultimately going to be in, not waiting for them to be in a sergeant's or lieutenant's position and then training them reactively, trying to get ahead of that. We're still trying to limp out of pre-pandemic levels of community outreach and events. I think we're doing better than what we did last year, but again, we had some significant openings last year. We carried 3 officer open positions for the bulk of the year and 1 dispatcher. We're down to 1 now, so I feel even better about how we can engage in our community and really start to focus on those outreach events again. Some of the things that we've heard in some of the community outreach meetings that we've done so far is really prioritizing traffic enforcement, speed enforcement, stop sign enforcement, stuff like that. That seems to be a common trend in a lot of the meetings that we've had. Again, focusing on the criminal interdiction side of things with the narcotics. We're seeing not just the narcotics, but we're seeing a significant connection with the narcotics tied to sex human trafficking, which is concerning. So really focusing on interdiction side of things, and then police visibility, just being out there. Another thing that came up in our community events meetings was just community members like to see officers doing foot patrols. They like to see the cruisers going through the neighborhoods. So focusing on that too. Questions on that?
Aligns with the things I feel like I'm hearing as well for priorities from community members.
Paul? What's included in this budget? Looks like they got the okay. So 3.483210 is the general fund budget. That includes the contractually required increases for full-time salaries and benefits line item. That also includes the lift for the community outreach team and Howard, and then additional funding that's related to the regional dispatch solution.
Yeah, and I'll speak to that last point, so don't blame the messenger here. So I did include an increase over what's already in the budget now, which we haven't spent, so being very transparent about that. The original idea of that increase was once we went to regional dispatch, we would need admin support, because currently our dispatchers provide admin services that regional dispatch was not intending to continue. Now I've increased it over that because at the time of budgeting, I thought basically regional dispatch was going to die soon. But since then, we had the December meeting with the Chittenden County's
The CCPSA, Public Safety Authority?
Yes, thank you. Public Safety Authority, which is supposed to deliver regional dispatch. And we're not quite ready to pull our money out yet because the state is, the final report that they're signaling should be coming in February. We'll see if that happens. And not to say that that's going to have like all the magic solutions in it, but given that that's so close, I'm not so sure that it is dead. However, I put that money in there because it's a placeholder amount that that would help us get towards one of other. So basically, there's three options. One is like regional dispatch continues, and it is how we've all been thinking it was going to happen. Another possibility, if regional dispatch dies during FY26, is if we pay for another dispatch center, an existing municipal dispatcher department to dispatch for us. Maybe it's just fire, maybe it's also police, maybe it's, and it's unclear right now. We're working towards costing out those options, but we don't have quotes yet. The third option that I could think of is to bring everything here, which means that we would be paying for computer-aided dispatch here. We also don't have a quote for that either. That requires site visit. It's not just like a, out of the box here, you're this size you get, is what you would cost you. They'd have to come and do the visit. So I understand this can be frustrating for the community, carrying this money with not clear results, but I think we're more articulate about what the options are now than we have been, and we fully intend to keep up that momentum. Let me check my notes and see if there's anything I missed that I meant to talk about. So the statewide regional dispatch effort, that for reference, that effort was dictated in Act 78, which was passed in 2023. So it was the January 6th report that they indicated that I misspoke, not February. The final system design report would be available in March of 2025. So at the very least, I would not recommend council direct staff yet to pull out the city's $67,000 that's currently in the CCPSA account, that is currently earning interest, just for a few more days, actually. And then we intend to reconvene in April to decide whether we pull our funds out then, which is of course, unfortunately, after town meeting. Yeah, and then a point of clarification, the interest that our portion is earning would be expected to come back to the city. So whether it's here or there, it's functionally doing the same thing.
Elaine, so where did the 26,000 number come from?
That was based on it was a way to get a number. So the number is based on if we had to add another dispatcher here at a grade 2, Angela, correct me if I'm wrong, in order to accommodate staff here. Now, that number may or may not be anywhere close to what the option would cost. It was just to get a number in there that would get us closer to presumably a higher cost.
I believe it was a dispatcher up to, I believe, step 5, which is what our hiring process says.
Ah, got it, thank you.
So it's assuming that the 67, or whatever the existing funding amount is not enough to do that.
Well, we would get that back eventually, but it's one-time money. So it's assuming that all that together isn't enough.
Okay.
The 26,000 that's added to the 79, that in total would equal a full-time person, including benefits. The 79,000 is not enough to cover benefits for a full-time position.
Okay, thank you for that clarity.
Is there anything staff wants to add at this time? All right. Any questions about regional dispatch before we'll let Justin continue? It's not your last chance.
Paul? Thanks. So an overall roll-up of the budget, FY24, FY25, what's projected for FY25, and then FY26 projection is 3.483210. Developing issues. Again, we're currently at 15 officers, 4 dispatchers. That's we were fully staffed up until this week. We have at least 1 anticipated retirement during FY26. We think we're going to have 2 within the next 24 months. Again, it currently takes 12 to 18 months to interview, hire, and train new officers, so constantly trying to stay ahead of the vacancies. We do have the 1 vacant sergeant's position. We're going to wait until we're fully staffed again to backfill that sergeant's position. So we'll have a full supervisory team at that point. Career development, again, now that we're close to fully staffed, we're going to focus on sending our new lieutenant and our new sergeants to mid-management and first-line supervisory trainings. We really would like to get to a point where we're getting these trainings in before we do the promotions, but where we're at now, we're a little bit reactive to it, but we still want to focus on getting that done. Added stress that's caused by minimum coverage for the past 24 months due to patrol shifts has had a negative impact on the entire police department. We're eager to have a balance where we're not working so much overtime. We have a pretty exhausted patrol crew that's been doing a lot of hours and a lot of work and a lot of good work, but we're close to a breaking point. So it'll be good to have the people that just graduated the academy on the road. Regional dispatch, we just talked about that a little bit. Again, they're supposed to release the final draft in March. The condition of the building continues to get worse. We're excited to begin the planning phase of the renovation downstairs and what that looks like. Issues with our community. I've talked a little bit about this in our one-on-ones with council and the mayor. The mental health calls continue to be very challenging. We seem to be taking more and more mental health calls on. It's frustrating. It's frustrating for the officers. It's frustrating for the people that are in crisis. I think there needs to be a focus at the state level with the Department of Mental Health on some guidance and some more resources and availability for people that are in crisis, and also the people that are trying to help the people that are in crisis. Our narcotics related cases continue to climb. They're becoming more complex. Like I said a little bit ago, we're seeing a direct correlation like we've never seen before when it comes to narcotics and human and sex trafficking, which indicates, more of a organized crime and organized organization scope to it. There's also a connection with our youth that we're seeing with some of these more high-profile cases when it comes to narcotics, when it comes to motor vehicle thefts. So that's a big concern. It seems like, particularly with the motor vehicle thefts, the people that are committing these crimes are getting younger and younger and younger. So that's something that we really want to focus on. And that's it.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that your full staff was so short-lived.
It felt good while we had it.
Do you think then it's likely, you're down one again? Do you think that's probably going to persist for the next year?
I'm confident it's not going to.
Okay.
I'm confident it's not going to. Again, we have our hiring process, we have our hiring standards, and we stick to that. If we can get to a certified police officer that transitions a little bit quicker to get them on the road. If it's somebody that we hire that's new, then we do have that academy process and that training process that goes with it.
Okay.
That will push us out into the next year.
And I would also ask for the building renovations, where is the actual construction money sitting in a budget or coming from grant?
Angela?
We have been repurposing the funding that was allocated for regional dispatch renovations to the police department. There is over $57,000 of that money still remaining.
Do you anticipate that being enough, or will more money be needed to complete renovation?
We're not certain at this time. The current contract is for an evaluation to get a plan together, which should give us a better idea of cost.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Angela.
Bryn?
Have we completed and executed a contract for that scoping work yet?
Yes.
Do we have a timeline for when the work will be completed?
We have a kickoff meeting with Brother tomorrow, actually.
Very exciting. Can't wait to learn more.
Aurora?
Yeah, I was just wondering, with the position that's like helping with recruiting, and I think this is something that's come up in both previous just general previous conversations, around the way that is it possible to help recruit, even nationally recruit, with the different culture that the Winooski Police Department is trying to cultivate and the community connection? Is that something that is seen as desirable for certain folks in the field that we can capitalize on in recruitment and retention?
Yeah, as far as the recruitment, I'm really excited about what the recruitment team can do as far as outreach. You know, historically, we've just gone off ads here and there, you know, and now with this outreach team put together, we've set stuff up where we can go to job fairs, we can go to colleges, we can go out of state and really get our name out there as far as how we police, the community that we police. And we think when people learn more about our community and our police department and how we kind of work together, I think it's going to be huge as far as the recruitment, and I do think we'll get more applications out of that.
Wonderful, that's really exciting.
Are there any more questions from council? Charlie?
Yeah, Chief, what would you say your number one issue is with retention? Or rather, what could potentially be included in future budgets that would help you with retention, specifically that issue?
That's a good question, and since I've been here, this last vacancy we've had was the first time that we've lost an officer to go to another agency in Vermont. So the retention part has been more about officers moving to another state or retirements. But what we're seeing now is the competitiveness with contracts and pay and benefits. So that's where it's important to focus some of our efforts on.
Right, it sounds like it's a little bit of like just life happening to folks, but also like we're just not necessarily the most competitive department.
No, I think we have been competitive, and I think it's important.
But lately, though, I mean like very recent past and very near future.
I think one of the things that we saw coming up a lot was signing bonuses for people going to a different department. We have had bonuses that are included in our union, but it requires somebody to be full-time certified coming in and is payable over a period of time to ensure that they remain with us instead of job hopping to get those bonuses.
Okay, great. Thank you both for explaining some of that to me. I appreciate it.
Any questions from members of the public? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Chief, before you get started, I want to call a 5-minute recess. I've got 8:12, so we will reconvene at 8:17. Thank you. All right, we are on the fire presentation. Chief Audi, take it away.
Good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to yet be here another year. How the years kind of click by, they get away from us. But yeah, happy to be here, and tonight our outline is similar to what you just saw with PD, who we are, our foundation, some stats, the budget, and then some look aheads, and then obviously your questions. Our org chart, so I lined it up a little different this year, and this is fluid year to year, and that is, it's a great question to ask. I've asked myself of, why does it change year to year? And I would say that's part of our ability to continue to provide services and look for opportunities to improve year to year or within existing budgets. So, this year again has been coupled with some changes. The first one in red is the fire marshal. Chief Palmer went back to the state. Big shoes to fill, but I'm happy to say, and Chief Spittle had to go back to his current job, but Chief Spittle has accepted the full-time position of fire marshal.
Oh, great.
So Chief Spittle brings 23 years of service to Winooski, 40 years of business management, managing deadlines and people and big projects, deadlines, So we're looking forward to having him come into that position, and you know, a lot of what we do is customer service. It's not, you know, just emergency response, and even on the emergency response, there has to be that customer service element. It's important to us. And just, again, his overall business management, I have no worries on the fire side, obviously, with his 23 years. So John's from Winooski, for those that don't know, raised his family here. His 2 grown daughters went through the school system, so, and has no plans of leaving soon.
Fantastic.
So on the assistant fire marshal side, you know, again, a few changes there. The fire inspector position, that was part-time. If you go left to right across there in the middle, within this year's allocated monies, we were able to elevate that position to full-time, and actually create another fire inspector, again, in an effort to create depth. And that was in this FY25, there's appropriated monies to hire a full-time evening captain, and we were unable to recruit for that position. So it is just another way for us to kind of apply available resources. And then on the part-time, the bottom 3 rows, again, left to right, are part-time folks. We continue to see vacancies. This is what I would consider a comfortable minimum of what we need on these companies, if you will. And these companies will do a weekend duty crew that starts on Saturday, ends on Sunday. As a whole, there are part-time folks that come in after hours, 6P to 6A. So again, we're strong in numbers when there's emergencies, and we've consistently had these vacancies. I anticipate 2 other vacancies coming. We'll talk a little bit more about that this year. On a really good note, over the last couple weeks of getting back from holidays, we have 6 interviews. I've never had to do 6 interviews for part-time folks. It's unlikely all 6 move forward, but optimistic. 6, bringing on 6 for us at a time would be a huge lift, quite frankly. So we'll be managing that in the days to come. You'll see this every year as long as I'm here, and that's our 5 E's. The engineering, enforcement, emergency response, economic incentives, and education. You know, we are wrapped around this spoke, if you will. You know, I feel really good about how we've built around this, the support that you've all given, and quite frankly, the community's buy-in to this. It's proven to be successful. It's proven to, you know, kind of survive time, if you will. Different years, you know, through COVID, we were able to adjust the different E's, and you know, we had to do a little more in one area than the other. But there's definitely consistent parts of this, you know, in the emergency response, and through our data collection over the last few years, we're able to see some of those consistencies. And you know, we travel around. If you can kind of vision us coming to work every day, we kind of travel around these 5 E's, sometimes 4 or 5 times a day. I feel like today I've been around this about 20 times. So at the end of the day, it's about, you know, really getting ahead of the call, and I think that's super important for Winooski and how we do business. Kind of our year in review with inspections, and this is July 1 of 23 to June 30th to 24. And this is kind of a snapshot of, you know, we issued 216 building permits. I'm kind of working from the top, left to right, if you will, around. Public building inspections, 1,214, which is becoming a very consistent number as we collect this data. Emergency responses were 574. Again, another pretty consistent number. And one that's changed for us over the last few years and continues to trend upward, which is concerning, is the re-inspections. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And at the bottom, you know, there's a 4-year kind of run of what this looks like. Again, left to right on the bottom, you know, emergency response is staying pretty stable. The public building registry, I would expect that kind of tiered look with the public building piece and how we have the city broken into districts. Because there's different workloads within the districts. I suspect over the next 4 years, you will see that kind of mimic that same trend. And again, the re-inspections, which we started to track last year, were concerning, and they're even more concerning this year.
That's, to be clear, that's when you have to go back because the first one had failures?
That's correct.
Okay.
And we'll talk a little bit about that in a future slide here. Next one, Paul. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to raise a hand or catch our attention. The 1,214 initial inspections, again, is a pretty consistent number. And we pulled out some of the percentages last year. The large percentage in the top left, the 47% of the violations are our National Fire Protection, the NFPA code, which are state-adopted codes, which in turn the city adopts through. So that's your smoke detectors, that's all the life safety kind of egress windows, the fire, the fire components of a building. And as we move over to the right top, 21% of those are National Electrical Code. So presumably, a building's built and it's gone through some sort of process of, work is supposed to be done under the National Electrical Code. So a big percentage of this 21% is maintenance. They're broken fixtures, there's exposed wires, and a lot of that is just through use, wear and tear, if you will, and maintenance, how aggressive someone is maintaining their building. So again, these numbers are staying pretty consistent year to year. On the bottom left, the 24% of violations in the Vermont Rental Code, again, a pretty consistent number. It's up a little bit this year, and again, that may be just the district that we're working in. So this is year 2 of kind of pulling out these pieces, and it would be interesting to see over the 4-year cycle how close they stay to each other. But right now, it appears they're staying very consistent. On the bottom, and there's a couple pieces missing, but the residential inspections were about 920, commercials were 80, construction, so the site visits we do, were 75, and the final closeouts were 27. So in the circle, in the pie in the middle, the big blue, if you go to the orange, which is the commercial inspections, the gray, so we're kind of working upward around the circle, is construction. Yellow is the final closeouts, and a couple points that are missing is the really dark blue is time of sale inspections, which is up, which again, we know real estate's starting to recover some, and it's at 45, which is almost double what it was last year. So, the city, it's good news, right? The city is seeing that same trend of real estate starting to try to recover a bit. And then the green is property complaints, and I apologize for those 2 pieces missing on the bottom. And the property complaints were 56 this year, which is actually down from last year.
Is that like the minimum housing complaint?
Yep.
Okay. Aurora, I see your hand.
I was just wondering or if you could just remind me where the short-term rentals might land, because if I recall, some of registering those has revealed several that were not already on the registry.
So keep in mind, this is from July 1 of 23 to June.
Gotcha.
So next year, you will see short-term rentals, and we will bring that data forward.
Okay.
As
Thank
far
you for
as
that
how many short-term rentals, what our compliance looked like, what our successes with it, and ultimately I'll be able to tell you some of that workload, because I know that I'm interested in that information too. I will say, just kind of, it's working. We know we identified Jasmine, who's not here tonight, and Jenny have done a great job of getting the word out. And getting people kind of in line. I believe there's under 15, I believe, that we're still chasing from the initial, which is not bad when you're starting at 60 or 70, and don't quote me on those numbers, but nothing alarming there as far as the trends that I initially have seen or the workloads that I'm seeing. People are pretty eager to get through the inspections to be able to get that license. And I will say it has bumped our compliance. There's quite a few people that weren't compliant, and they've had to kind of, it's accountability. So it's allowed us to take another step in accountability. And that's part of the success of doing something like that, in my opinion.
Awesome, that's exciting, thank you.
Bryn?
Staying on that, just as a refresher, inspections are only for short-term rentals that are not owner-occupied or have owner occupancy, correct?
No,
I think it's both.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
required for everyone. The licensing fee for non-owner occupied is higher than the owner occupied. Maybe that was a distinction you were recalling.
Okay. Thanks for differentiating that. And then we don't have anything for the first half of FY25?
Nope, I have not tracked it. I don't, and I can certainly get that data. We can give you a snapshot of what, of what that looks like currently, if you want, outside of kind of this presentation. I would have to do it, obviously.
Yeah, historically, it's not something John's done.
Yeah, just curious if you're seeing any different trends from what you're presenting from the first 6 months of this fiscal year.
Right, and I think I'm representing that, and my watch of it so far, and understanding where Jasmine's at and where the clerk is at, is there's no surprises here as far as we're achieving what we're able to achieve what you set us out to do. And again, I would say it's even helped that compliance piece more than any of us thought it would.
Great, glad to hear it.
Yep. And on that slide with these inspections, I would just, on the National Fire and, kind of what are our top 5, violations we're writing. Number 1 is handrails. So, as years pass, the codes change, focus on codes change. So, handrails, we're rating a ton of those, whether it's the height or the distance of the guards or non-existing, pieces. And again, that's really, people say, why are you writing a handrail? And that's really about getting ahead of the call. And it's not just a fire call, it's that call that would generate an EMS call, those sorts of things. So, the electrical maintenance, the broken fixtures is number 2. Number 3 would be periodic inspection of heating systems, which by law has to be done every 2 years. So that one really pops up that's education. Number 1, I don't think a lot of the property owners understand that that's a 2-year touch. And then it's accountability after education. And that's really us having the staff to, we've identified that there's an opportunity to educate and then, hold accountable. But that really takes consistent staffing. And that's something we're working on, obviously. And number 4 would be egress reliability. And then lastly, I would say is the use of extension cords. So, again, when we talk about getting ahead of the calls, we see power strips that we call them daisy chained. So power strips plugged into sometimes even an extension cord. And then there's 2 or 3 other power strips plugged into each other. And those are made to be plugged in directly to the wall in that single use of that device, not daisy chained. And it's, again, today's world of everything needs to charge, everything, we want everything to be ready for us at our fingertips. So, if you're plugging in 20 devices, if you walk into your house tonight, you probably don't have 20 available outlets to charge everything simultaneously, so people do what they need to do. And we find yearly, sometimes several a year, melted, devices. So Any questions on inspections? I really look forward to bringing more inspection data as we go year to year. Admittingly, the record management systems are really focused on our emergency responses. It's a lot easier for me to pull that data. There is not a lot of communities that do as much as we do as far as inspections. So the data is it's there, but it's a little harder for us to pull out in a timely manner. So every year I try to do a little more so that we can, it's important for us to understand. On the emergency response, 574 responses, and the breakdown on the left. Again, this is very consistent with last year, and you'll see a little bit more of that graph. So nothing alarming here. No pun intended with like the false alarms or anything like that. But and then on the next slide, I tried to really take a little bit deeper dive into what that means. And on the previous, we really do our reporting on a national level. So we had 68 fire incidents, and within the national incident reporting system, there's 8 different categories I can assign a fire in. And our top 3 are cooking fires, building fires, and outside fires. And the same with service. There's 10 different, we did 112 service calls. There's 10 different ways I can assign those calls. Our top one is elevators with no occupants. So something's happened, dispatch got the button pushed in the elevator, the alarm's going off in the elevator. We do that 58 times a year. Some people ask, why do you go to those? There could be somebody stuck in it. We don't know. And again, that's an appropriate number with the build out of Winooski. As you continue to build out. The buildings you're doing at the end of Winooski Falls Way, there'll be elevators. And we know each of those buildings built are going to generate these calls. So again, this data allows this community to start to plan of, what the workload will be in the future, what the demands will be in the future. Same with the good intent calls, 78, 7 different ways to report it. We were canceled 59 times en route, so somebody's made a 911 call and the dispatchers are able to connect the dots and they're able to either keep us in quarters or return the truck. And Gwen, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. Just, I was curious, of the 58, how many would you attribute to the Casavan garage?
Say that again, I couldn't, the 68 fire,
Yeah, of the 58 elevator calls, I was curious what percentage or a rough estimate of how many of those you would attribute to the Casavan garage, parking garage?
Yeah, so the 2 points there is I can tell you each address, what types of calls been there historically now, since we've been doing the record keeping. So I can bring that property up and tell you for the last, I think, 7 years, what's been there for inspections and calls. There was quite a spike in elevator calls at that location and or false alarms due to what was happening in the stairwells. So I do not have the exact number for you tonight, but that information is available to us for any individual property. And we look at that when we feel we have a problem property, or what actions we're going to take. We look at how many times we've been there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. The good intent, again, 7 different types. We were canceled en route. The odor of smoke, no incidents found. Move over on the top on the right is the rescue EMS is 73. Where you assisted rescue, whether it's St. Mike's or UVM or another agency, 40 times. Motor vehicle accidents, no injuries, the 15. And again, elevator comes up again, but this is with occupants. So it's assigned different, it's considered a rescue. False alarms, which is one I watch pretty closely. Again, we can assign it a lot of different ways. The 75 is the automatic fire alarm activations. No fire, it's unintentional. They're mechanical, they're electrical devices, they fail. Our environment, Vermont's climate, hot, cold, wet, it all impacts how much people are taking care of those systems. So again, the importance of our inspection systems. What I would say, with any of these in this line, if you were not doing inspections, and there are communities not doing inspections, that's a possibility of 75 automatic fire alarms, 31 smoke alarms, devices that people would not know are not working. So we prevent a ton of that through this number would be much larger, is my point, if we weren't doing the inspection program. It would be much, much larger, because we write a ton of that in the inspection piece, again, getting ahead of having to go answer 75 of those. So we're managing the demand, therefore how quickly we need the staff and what you need for equipment, and your investment is in the inspections. The hazards, 10 different types, again, carbon monoxides, power line down. So again, just a little deeper dive into kind of, what it is we do. These are nationally reported. To qualify for any grants, we have to report this in this manner. It's all done electronically and through our record management system. Come on. So again, before going on to another pause, I just wanted to welcome John. For those that don't know, this is Chief Spittle, who I spoke about, that's coming on board. So
Happy to have you coming into the fire marshal role.
Very excited about it. Looking forward to it. Yeah,
Awesome.
Just kind of an extension of what I've done for 23 years in public safety, but certainly on a different angle. So looking forward to it.
So this slide, this is one we've done for quite a few years now and pulled some data. There are some years cut off on the bottom, and I think that's how it's framed up here. But if you move left to right across those bars, this is covering 2016 to 2024's data. So again, the blue on the left of those is 2016, and obviously 2024. So your fire instances have, nothing's really out of whack with those. If you go to EMS, that's how many EMS calls we have responded to. An interesting piece and something on my to-do list is to work with St. Mike's. We need to understand, this community needs to understand the actual EMS transport calls and the demands of what's happening. It's a piece that we don't even see. They do 14 to 1,600 EMS calls into the city, and understanding what those calls are, time of day, transports versus no transports, how many times the second, third, fourth ambulance is coming in, is a whole nother piece of this that I feel is pretty important for our community risk program to understand. Bryn.
I'm just trying to make sure I'm reading this correctly. It looks like the FY24 data is pushed off a little to the right, and then there's a space between that and FY23 data.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious what's the reasoning for the...
There's not supposed to be a space, so there's supposed to be a whole nother row of data on the bottom, and I'm not sure what that space is, so...
Okay.
Those should be all together. There should not be a space.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, all good. Again, just making sure I'm not missing something.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We had no calls that year. I would be happy with that. Questions on any of this? Again, it's pretty it's reassuring data. Doesn't, it's data to track as with the model we're running, and kind of as the community continues to build out, and they're indicators of how we need to react and focus and invest. Again, along the service demands, calls by day of the week, calls by month, and calls by hour breakdown. I watch this a lot. Why is it important? And it's how our model. We have full-time staff here. Certain days, certain times. I don't worry much about the months, but I certainly track the day a week in the hourly breakdowns. The hourly breakdowns. I can tell you Monday through Friday. Full-time staff is here 6 a.m. to 1800, and if I look at that graph, am I catching? Is that a good investment, or do I need to adjust schedules, right? And this data suggests that we are catching the, not all, but we're catching the bulk of those calls and those hours and our demands. So it's a good investment. We're on track with our thinking. But again, those are indicators. This isn't just one of us wants to work at 6 a.m. and one of us wants to work at 8. We really look at this data year to year, and really, data is no good if you're not going to look at it and understand. So, pretty important stuff for me as fire chief. This is a good one, and there's a few pieces of this. In the green, obviously we have moved a part-time here. We're indicating that we hired a part-time fire inspector. We've actually moved that part-time position to full-time and actually have a vacant spot. So we've created a lot of potential growth and depth on the green. Our paid on call, they're still covering a huge piece of what we do. And actually, out of this whole presentation, that is probably my most concerning piece. So on the red, we're saying part-time staff, 6P to 6A. I've said for quite a few years that is our most vulnerable time. On our org chart, it seemed like there was a lot of people, right? It looked like we had a lot of staff. But the fact is, if the tone goes right now, I don't know if any of those people are available. So it's uneasy. It creates a level of stress, a level of question, and you will hear me a lot talk about that. And again, data, right? So now if we go down on the bottom data sets here, the paid on call, which is the third one down from the top, if you will, that orange line is this year, and that grew. So that our demands are happening more. We're depending more on the people that I'm telling you, I don't know if anyone's coming. Our demands are growing where I'm most concerned. And that is 6P to 6A. And I want any of our staff that are watching, our community, to know, although I'm concerned about it, number one, our part-time folks pull a huge load here. I've had fire chiefs that come and try to understand what we do and tell me they just don't understand how we do it. And that's really on the load and the commitment that our part-time staff have. But when we look at sustainability and are we keeping up with the future demands, we're there for sure. And this is the most concerning data point in this whole presentation for me. It's going to keep me up more. Again, I don't want to. This isn't the end all for sure. I just want to emphasize my concern over that, and we are trying to address it. You are supporting me in trying to address that. It's just we need to continue to stay vigilant with that effort.
Chief, this has been an area of concern for some years. Do you think it's consistent or becoming more of a concern for you?
So this data tells me it's becoming more of a concern. I have more concern, but this data is supporting what I'm feeling.
Okay.
So again, I say you're supporting, right? And we're talking about, the station renovations and I'm as scared as you are about talking about going 24/7 here. But the community is there, the demand is there, we need to manage what that looks like, because it can get way out of control, quite frankly. And we have worked hard to right size our department. I have worked hard to right size. These guys have stood behind me right sizing. They haven't all agreed with how I've right sided Winooski as far as number of trucks, equipment. But the reality is there's only so much tax base here. And, so what's acceptable? What are the expectations? There's national standards that would tell this community you need to do it a certain way. And in many ways, we don't meet that national standard. That doesn't mean that it's not right for Winooski. Whether it's me that continues to sit in the seat or someone else, you need to believe in what this position, what this expertise is bringing to you about concerns. And this slow move, in my opinion, this has been a slow, methodical move for this part of the emergency services in Winooski. And, just please stay committed to that. And, it is a big commitment on everyone's part, right? The taxpayer, you, decision makers, us trying to provide services, and the model we use is, again, I don't want to put words in other people's mouths. I never do that, but I've sat quite a bit with some other area chiefs, some of the chiefs that touch this community, and they're like, no way. We're averaging between 8 and 11 minute response. We put that in perspective, and it's a whole different animal. They got 22 people over there, but Burlington's out the door in 2 minutes. So how do I manage? How do I say to you? How do I say to the community? It's okay that we're 8 to 11 minutes. And I'm going to go back to the 5 E's, and I'm going to tell you, I can assure you that a huge percentage of the fire alarms, the sprinkler systems, and all that is up and adequate, maintained, and ready to go. And they're all part of my team. And they're part of this community's team. So stay committed to the community risk reduction, and continue to do the slow move.
Thanks for that. Thomas, I see your hand.
Thank you. Chief, thanks as always for this presentation. Recently, we were talking about, at one of our Safe, Healthy, Connected meetings, when you were briefing folks about the department, you were talking about the response time for a volunteer, how long it has to take them to get from their home to the fire department in order to be a volunteer with the city, and I think it was 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, and maybe you've already done this, so like the 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. On-call period, during that time, and imagine that there's less traffic, which might mean that somebody who, say, lives in Burlington and usually would take them, 8 or 9 minutes to get to the station, might be able to get to the station within those 5 minutes during those times. Do you take that into consideration when you're talking with volunteers about the time of the shift they might be available for? Or is that just kind of too much Google mapping to figure that all out?
No, it's a great question, and we take 3 points. I take usually in the morning, midday, and then later in the afternoon, and I average those. And sometimes we'll do in the evening. It's, we try to, again, look at it of, all right, it makes no sense for me to try to figure out if they can get here at 8 a.m. if they're my responder from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. I think it goes to what you're asking. So we try to look at it as many different points as we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Bryn?
I know you just said this. Are the 6 folks that are interviewing for part-time or for on-call? How does that fit into what we're seeing on this slide right now?
So the 6 interviews that I mentioned, number one is I don't know how many of those will move forward. right? I hope all 6 do. But I know I'm going to lose 2. And, that's not going to solve our problem, right? And they are going to be part of the equation for this, the 6P to 6A. They're certainly going to bolster our chances of getting people during those periods of time, for sure. But they're going to be become part of my equation where sometimes I get 1, sometimes I get 9, sometimes I get no one. Sometimes it's 6 minutes, sometimes it's 8 minutes, sometimes it's 12 minutes. They're still part of that equation just by the model of what we run.
I guess a clarifying question for me is, so the paid on call and the part-time staff that are in a couple slides back on your org chart,
Mm-hmm.
those are the same, you're talking about the same group of people?
Yep. So when you look at this, sorry, and that's a great clarifying point, the weekend duty on the bottom, the Saturday and Sunday, they're required, our part-time staff, the same people, they have to do a full weekend plus either Saturday or Sunday a month. So each company is doing that, but why I don't worry about those times, right? I can I'm free for that period of time because I know I have an officer and I know I have 3 or 4, hopefully, people available, and they may not be right at the station, but I know they're available. They're required to respond to that call. Unlike the 6P to 6A, is kind of the Wild West, if you will, whoever is available, and it is all over the place. It's sometimes it seems crazy, right? I mean, we get the tone could go down, I could get 9, and an hour later I'll get 1. It's just, it depends what's going on in their life, and I appreciate that, but it just brings an element of unknown.
Yep, thank you for the clarification.
Next slide. Yeah, so again, we're trying to, this is a lot of what you saw last year. This is really the minimums. The green is kind of the minimum daytime, what we're trying to get to. And then some of the pressures. There's still tremendous workload on our full-time staff. To kind of do this 6A to 6P, we're covering a lot of bases, but it works. I've talked a lot tonight about in the red, the unpredictability, the requirements. These folks are on-call part-time folks, did over 1,000 hours of training this last year. So they're working full-time, they're answering calls, plus, as a group, they did over 1,000 hours of training. That's a huge number, and again, the work they do is, I couldn't do it anymore, and I don't have kids anymore. And the world has changed so much when I came into this many years ago. But I just don't know how they do it some days, and I certainly appreciate it. The weekend duty crew, again, we're just low on numbers. To Bryn's point, if we bring on any number that we bring on, will help bolster that number. And I know there was a question early on in our budget process. It would be good to know number of firefighters that respond. Is there times that there's no one that responds? And that's my effort on the bottom to kind of show you, again, what keeps us up. These numbers are growing. The instances, our call volume has grown a little bit, so keep that in mind. But the times that we go with no one answers the call is, I think last year was 5, maybe 7. This year was 5. It's not huge, but any time no one answers a call, it's a huge concern. We do have backup plans. Again, I don't want the community to understand, to think that, no one's going to answer their need. We do have backup plans. We have a process in which the dispatcher knows no one's coming. They're going to call a neighboring department and it's going to get dealt with. But the instances that we're going out the door with 1, 2, 3, or 4 firefighters is growing. And that's just a sign of the pressures on the model, availability of our, our part-time folks. So just, again, another data point to keep track of. Questions on that? Next. Again, a part of our service demands, we always track the auto aid. For those that don't know, auto aid is an agreement where departments automatically respond with each other and are toned to the same instances. And then mutual aid is usually bigger events. We're called to communities to support them with bigger events, and departments come here for bigger events. That's kind of mutual aid. Some of these are countywide, some of these are statewide. Your auto aids are usually localized, which there's another slide in here. Winooski for years has done auto aid with Colchester, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And again, data, gives us a lot of power, and as far as decision making, auto aid given. And this is a flop of this data over recent years. We used to receive a ton of auto aid into the city, and the data is flopped. And auto aid, we this last year provided 130 times the Route 15, 7, and St. Mike's Court campus. So we left the city with your fire trucks, your staff, 130 times auto aid. We received that back 72 times. And again, this used to be, Winooski used to benefit quite a bit, actually. But we've gone from us receiving a lot of auto aid to us giving a lot of auto aid, and there's been no equalized, it's never equalized out for Colchester or for Winooski. The mutual aid given and taken is about the same. That can fluctuate year to year. And the auto aid piece, I would ask you to just remember this kind of ratio, I think for the next, possibly for the next slide. Our accomplishments, we've continued the part-time on-call recruitment, retention efforts through Make Me a Firefighter, which is a statewide campaign. We have not, I take that back. I believe we have, over the last 2 years of being part of that campaign, we hired one. So was it worth it? Yes. But they are a lot of work. Departments around us, this isn't answering a lot of questions, if you will, as far as bringing in staff, not only for Winooski, but around the region. Our fire dispatching conversations continue, as you were updated on earlier. We've moved to part-time fire inspector. We again got back to tagging our commercial, our big kind of commercial piece of the city. We were able to go to one of the employers and be part of their safety day. It's 100 plus employees. Did some fire extinguisher training there. Our community outreach events, the block parties, Winooski Wednesdays, Farmers Market, Special Olympics, which I did not write here, which was really cool. We were asked again for the second year to go present awards at the end of their competition, so it was really, it's very rewarding for the staff to go do it. And then one of my best memories this last year is we were returning from a call and came across a game of street basketball on Hickok Street, and so we pulled over and the kids' eyes were all big and we were like, let's play. And so we spent 15 minutes and played a game of street pickup basketball with them, and made their day, made our day. Continue to attend the Winooski Business Safety Roundtable meetings that are held monthly. I see a lot of value in that, and just opening lines of communication. And then, lastly, and you'll hear more about a little bit in this, is strengthening the relationship with Burlington Fire. And some will look at that and say, well, hasn't there always been a relationship with Burlington? Again, they've always come across on mutual aid. When we've, a big incident, they'll always come over. but we're starting to understand, we can help them. We certainly need them more than they need us. But we have some pieces that we can help them with that are minimal investments for us, meaning not overtaxing our staff. And there'd be some great gains and coverages that we can get back into Winooski. The old saying was the bridge didn't connect the two. I can tell you we've already built a new bridge there, so we may be able to save you $27 million,
Yeah.
but who knows? For 2026, what's our goals? Continue to work with the property owners. Obviously, this is something we do every day. We can always do more of it. I hope to be able to get this staff dependent, a roundtable. I believe we can host a roundtable. We're in a pretty unique position with those, being surrounded by departments. We're not on the outskirts, so I believe we can have a pretty productive roundtable with fire and EMS. Obviously, Winooski comes first with understanding what models may be available in the future. The landlord-tenant education is something, again, we got to be staffed to be able to do it. The short-term rental piece is in. We've worked closely with Winooski Housing. Again, that's a relationship we have, we have worked to rebuild from years past. It's been productive. I think we have a much better understanding of each other and the value of working with each other. They offer a lot to this community, and we've acknowledged that and moving forward with that relationship. The acceptance of the new truck. This is one that's rising way up on my priority list, and this is really delayed from COVID. It's amazing that there's still supply, but really it's a labor shortage. There's a huge backlog of trucks waiting to be built, and they continue to sell them. It's again something that I push on monthly, especially when we have to work on the existing truck we have. We're trying to buy a new one for a reason, so something we keep track of. And then these other pieces are what's in the CIP, replacement of command car, the emergency generator, the station design. Continue our dispatching conversations, recruitment and retention. That's an everyday kind of piece for us. And then hopefully, this is pretty ambitious, but get to a community risk assessment internally. Again, it's really looking at a lot of our inspection data first, coupled with our emergency response data, and kind of understanding, taking a really good assessment of what that data is telling us and what our next moves may be. What's included in this budget, the overall budget, and again, this is a combined budget now, is just north of 900,000. I actually have a decrease in operational line items outside of salaries and benefits. That's really where the increase is here. That's across the city. Again, what's in the capital improvement I just covered. Our kind of roll up, if you will. If there's any questions, I can answer it here. Developing issues.
Sorry.
Yep.
Can you go back one? Nope, never mind. I misread something. Continue. I thought I saw a huge discrepancy, but it was a mistake.
I was like, man, I hope Angela's still on here. Developing issues, recruitment and retention. Look, this is going to be on for the foreseeable future. Again, this is not a Winooski problem. Certainly we have our pinch points in the model we're doing. And we're really up against some tough tough competition. There's really two departments locally doing a part-time model. Town of Colchester being one of them, and they're struggling. In fact, I'd like to, tell this community we are well ahead of where they are with what they're trying to do with paying their part-time staff. They're just implementing a paid system for their part-timers, and we've been doing it for a while now. And it's just, communities are in different places. And again, if we have a full-time position that's vacant, and we heard on the police side some of the pressures, are we competitive? I will say, trying to hire the full-time fire inspector position, kind of thinking that that's like equal to an entry-level firefighter position in a full-time department, we're not competitive. Williston just advertised today just below 60,000 for an entry level. And with lateral, so if you got years of experience, you're going in there and they credit you, they take that into account, and it's in the mid to high 70s as someone just coming in. And these full-time departments are doing this to each other, and you're literally seeing staff go from department to department to department. So I don't know what the answer is. I don't, I'll just kind of sit back and watch for a bit. And again, what's the actions to that? I think we've talked about those points. Any questions with that? Next one, Paul. So this one goes back to the auto aid that I mentioned to you. The supplemental coverage. We've exhausted the availability of the auto aid. And again, for those to kind of re-explain, auto aid is something where, Winooski, Colchester, St. Mike's, we used to all get a tone for Spinner Place, 6-story building. We'd all get toned to that, and together we would muster up enough people to safely and effectively operate there. And so through several conversations, again, Colchester's feeling the same pressures we are. They're 40 plus on their roster, and they're seeing 2-3 people respond. Sometimes not getting any of their trucks on the road, and St. Mike's College is the only truck to respond into Colchester. We're 1 square mile, put that in perspective, we're 1 square mile, they're 39 square miles. So obviously that demand is taxed St. Mike's resources. Their numbers on the fire side, not on the rescue side, on the fire side, are down. Several weeks with an S this last year, they were completely out of service because they didn't have staff. But again, St. Mike's has really been our go-to for auto aid. We would go to Colchester on the Route 715 corridor. That 130 times a year, but I knew I was going to get the St. Mike's truck back into the city 24/7, and that's no longer available to us. So that's when I start to tell you, again, Winooski used to get a lot of that auto aid. Now we're having to give a lot, and there's been no equalization, and it's due to lack of resources. St. Mike's we've stretched the St. Mike's rubber band between Colchester and Winooski really tight, too tight. And they have contractual agreements with Colchester, so really they have to pay attention to Colchester. So, and again, I want to say to anyone from Colchester, and certainly to our community, this does not mean they don't want to work with us. It does not mean if there's a big incident that they're going to come. They are going to come help us. It's the day-to-day, the elevator emergencies, the false alarms, the day-to-day stuff in Winooski that they don't have the resources to help support. So that's putting pressure on our model.
So are you saying like it's not available because the resource isn't there, or like formally has been decided we're not doing this anymore and they're just there for mutual aid?
So I have been told by the Colchester fire chief that there are no resources for them to participate on an auto aid agreement. mutual aid, again, if a fire is called in downstairs, that there's an actual fire in a building, we have a run card that they follow. And departments are plugged into that, and they will be part of that response. But it's not an auto, every call that they're coming into Winooski. We're not going to the Route 15 corridor for every fire alarm. There's gonna have to be an actual incident for us to go there.
So we're not giving it out anymore either?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, and that was my effort, is to try to get it to equalize.
Yeah.
You know, because again, we've right-sided and acknowledged that they couldn't continue to be the only one providing auto aid.
Mhm.
So it's been a 2-year swing for changes in their leadership and that sort of thing, that, you know, Winooski started to spike, and it's not easy for me. It's not easy for my guys 6P to 6A. I'm telling you, I want to worry about Winooski calls if I'm going to worry about if staff's coming. I don't want to worry about that truck going out of the city 130 times.
Mm-hmm.
I want to take that pressure off, unless I know I'm getting a couple people back on the St. Mike's truck to help augment. Am I missing anything? Nope. I mean, it's really what it's about, and it's, you know, and again, I don't want people to be, you know, mad at Colchester. It's just the fact we are all suffering from staffing shortages. The models we're running are really drying up, if you will. It's how we manage them, and again, that slow methodical move that I spoke about earlier. The importance of that continuing.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, so I think I've touched on most of those points. Is there any other questions there? Thus, the relationship with Burlington. You know, why would I go to Burlington with that information from Colchester? You know, and knowing how stretched St. Mike's is. The next closest truck to the city of Winooski is right by UVM, just across the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
So going to Burlington and them being open to conversations, so they come in here for a first alarm, we go there for seconds. So it's just, they got more resources to cover their first alarm, if you will. So it's just, that's how we've compensated some. And as always, thank you, and if there's questions.
Anything else from council? Or members of the public on Zoom? We don't have anyone left in the room. Okay, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Christine, can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
I know it's very late for council as well, but I was thinking you could council might make short work of the last item about the goal updates.
Oh, yes.
Before budget.
Yeah. Do you need to vote on that because it's an No, we'll just skip. Sometimes we skip an item. So we'll go to item E next, on for discussion, the strategic vision goal area update. Who wants to, wait, Ray, you're listed first.
I'm just gonna say,
No, you're all
are
here.
there any questions about the update?
Yeah.
Because essentially they've given you the update last week and this week.
Okay.
Great.
Wait.
I shared my questions in my.
Okay. No questions on that one.
Good.
Thanks.
All right. So it's 9:20 already. Next up is the item D for discussion. We're not making our final decision vote tonight for the fiscal year 2026 budget. So I think our goal tonight is to try to have discussion, get any final questions answered, or identify any additional information that we want to receive from staff before coming to a final decision. I think we can spend some time discussing what we hope to see brought to us in a warning next week for the formal vote. And we have access to the budget options tool if we want to deliberate any changes to what the city manager is recommending. Unfortunately, we don't have time to put the decision off another week, even though January is still going. We have to warn by the 23rd, I think.
You can wait until the 2nd of February, but then we will be constraining the amount of time that people have to vote by absentee.
Yeah, we don't want to do that. So I do think ideally we would leave this discussion tonight with some direction of where we're going. Staff could make some minor adjustments on the fly during the next meeting before we vote. It's not ideal, obviously, but I also put a memo in the packet this evening, pulling back together, where we came from with strategies and priorities, the direction we gave for budget goals, information collected through community engagement and outreach. And I also added some new context here from what leadership at the school has shared about uncertainty in education funding. And I would add, I think there's a lot of uncertainty in state budget and federal resources going forward. I called out in this memo here, during last year's budget process, we had uncertainty in the impact of reappraisal, and we were negatively surprised by how that played out. I feel that we are in a similar area of uncertainty, and I am recommending that we be conservative with any municipal spending increases, because I think we could be looking at another scenario where we don't realize how much added cost is actually going to come to taxpayers later on from other causes. I will say that my personal recommendation would be to move back to being closer to level services modest investment in infrastructure fire safety that we directed at the outset of our goals setting. I think we've heard tonight our emergency personnel staffing situation continues to grow more and more strained, while we've seen public safety needs growing and growth in our city generating more service needs. We have a lot of unknown costs with firehouse and PD reno construction, the SCBA devices we've been talking about, the other list of unknowns that was included in the initial goal setting discussion. I would recommend using reserve funding for the GMT special assessment, not putting that into operations. And I would also prefer not to commit increasing general fund operations to items that don't have clarity of what the plans or the costs are. So the increase in regional dispatch funding, the hold for the youth interventionist, and potentially the CCRPC equity director role, as I think we could address those decisions later on when more information is known, and use reserve funding to do a one-time bridge to the next budget that we want to roll it into operationally. That is where I am at with this budget, and would love to hear from each of you what you are thinking.
I'm going to start because I feel like the biggest thing that we need to talk about is the equity position, and I believe that we need to move forward with that no matter what. If we continue to put it off, we may never see it, and I think it's especially important to have that position given that we are going into these uncertain times. When we talk about not being able to retain or recruit, even in our police and fire departments, having access to do more equity work can just do general improvement that helps with recruitment, that helps make this more of an interesting place to stay, more of a safe place to work. So I believe firmly that this needs to be put into our budget as part of the baseline funding. I would agree that I would be comfortable moving the GMT, which I do think is very important, but moving that to a reserve request. I would also might suggest looking at the, like maybe doing one of the, let's see, let me get the exact, like one of the traffic calming studies have that in the main budget and one of them be another reserve request. So thinking of that kind of as a bridge, like building up for having that be a larger item that we consistently do, because I do want to see that in the budget, but I think we could maybe continue that bridge. I also am not in favor of putting more money towards the continued regional dispatch. The way I see it from what Elaine explained tonight is that we have $62K that we could use as that bridge funding should we need the $26K that's been laid out in this budget. It sounds like we have money that we will gain access to that we can use to do that bridge. I'm sick of this now being the third year we're coming forward with this thing that we don't know if it will ever happen. I appreciate that there might be more movement, there's a lot of stuff going on at the state level. So to me, I don't feel comfortable committing more money to that without information. And again, it feels like we have some funds specifically set aside for if this does not work, that we could use to bridge looking at the auto call or looking at, do we bring EMS and fire further into police dispatch? Like those other ideas. It seems like we have a pot of money specifically set aside for that already that we can pull from. So those are kind of where I'm at. I feel like we could do some bridge funding with the street calming because that's a continued priority, but again, kind of eases us into that and use reserves for GMT. You not put forward the regional dispatch money and do put forward the supporting an equity policy position.
Thanks, Aurora.
I can jump in, and I am going to try and walk through the spreadsheet, so bear with me. So I am supportive of Councilor Hurd's proposal to provide funding for the equity advisor. I appreciate the effort to put some funding towards traffic calming and having some sort of sustainable line item year over year. I think that means a lot to our community and shows a good faith effort to address a lot of the needs that we're hearing and have been hearing for a long time. Yes to moving the special assessment to reserves. I would like to see, instead of restoring the full 120K to capital budget, I'd like to see even half or a quarter to a half of that, so 60,000 rather than 120 towards capital budget. We just continue to hear the challenges with roads and sidewalks. I don't think that's going to get any better. I know we're making incremental progress there, so that would be something, not the full amount, but showing some additional incremental efforts there. I would propose that we either reduce or cut the youth interventionist position until we have a better idea of how the DLO is going to interplay with that. I know it's not the same, but again, I think there's just more clarity there, and I don't know that there's really staff capacity to make that decision. And I relate to Councilor Hurd's frustrations with regional dispatch. I think I'm also feeling some fatigue on that discussion year over year for the last 4 years. So I'm not sure that I would advocate for cutting it just yet, but I am rather tired of not seeing some progress there. And I like the idea of if we can pull additional funds from elsewhere and more or less sit on the money that we've set aside for the time being. So that's kind of where I'm falling right now. Interested to hear from Councilor Judge and Deputy Mayor Renner.
Thank you, Bryn.
Happy to go. I think I agree with what the two councilors before me have said. You know, as I'm looking at the spreadsheet, I look at the really big elephant in the room maybe that I think we've all kind of expressed desire for, but I don't know when it will ever make sense with the Community and Economic Development Director. I feel there's definitely a need for it in the community in a similar way to Councilor Hurd, what you're speaking about, you know, for the need of the equity specialist over the next 4 years. We don't know what budgets are going to look like. It's having somebody skilled on staff that might be able to source funds in a different way when we don't know what it's going to look like at the state level, I think is going to become quite necessary. You know, that said, when you add it, it really throws up that tax increase. But, you know, it's, you know, whether we do it this year or we do it next year or in 2 years, you know, I'm not fully certain that we're going to come out of the economic concerns that we have at the moment. And I feel the sooner we bring this position on, the sooner that position can start paying essentially for itself and paying for things to happen in the city. So, would like to throw that out there. I'm not, again, given everything going on, I don't want to say I'm 100% advocating that we put it on this year, but I'd at least like to know what everyone else is feeling about the position and barring elections, what this current group thinks of it moving forward.
Yeah, conveniently for all of us here, as time ticks on, I'm actually pretty well aligned with all of my fellow councilors. Just given we have such a small tax base and our constituents have been hit so hard in the last year, the little bit of shifting that we can do to move things from general to reserve, I think it's sort of like gain us some ground while we figure out how to get next year's needs met. Yeah, I'm looking at the spreadsheet. It's a much more favorable tax rate than last year, even as like a baseline. Yeah, not terribly articulate, but you guys covered a lot of the bases, particularly Thomas. I think having a person who's worked in equity for a long time be part of staff would be really, really helpful for potentially exploring other funding options for all sorts of projects and opportunities for our small town. So, yeah.
Okay, I think I'm hearing majority support for keeping the CCRPC equity contribution in. Show of hands? Okay, so we will keep that. I think I may be hearing majority support to remove the increase to dispatch funding. Okay. And to move GMT to reserve funding. I'm not certain on this. I think I heard that not holding the youth interventionist funding, that we can take that out and then revisit it when the plan comes together. Okay.
Yeah.
All the
I'd
other,
like to move
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I would prefer we keep the youth interventionist funding, but if, say, that's something that an equity advisor would weigh in on, how could we better handle equity-based positions? Like, I can see the value.
Okay. Those are the alignments I'm hearing. I know, Thomas, you asked for thoughts on CETO role. I would be happy to share mine. I don't think we're in a position where making that decision right now is a good idea. When we discontinued the CETO role, some of the parts of that job are offloaded to downtown Winooski, and so I think a new job description and scope of work would have to be developed, and wouldn't want to rush that process. I also would remind us that we scrapped that role coming from a conversation where we wanted it, that role was doing some housing focus, but council at the time wanted a stronger housing focus. That evolved into replacing that role with the housing initiative director. So I would want to see more thought go into, do we need both of these positions, or is it some sort of adjustment before we made a decision to add that back on?
I think I'm feeling similarly, like it feels really important and I would love to see more grant money come in. But I don't know if the position is gonna be so, both with deciding what it looks like and how immediate it will be with bringing in the money to off-balance it. I definitely want it to be maybe a main discussion point for next year, but not this year.
Yeah, I am in favor of definitely making a dedicated effort to seeing how we can fill that. I feel like we've been talking about it since Heather left, about how we're going to fill the skill set that she had and took with her as it relates to applying for grants, successfully winning grants. We hear time and time again that we can't chase grants because staff don't have the capacity or the expertise. And I know that that's doing a disservice to our community to not look at that, that role and those skills and bringing that back to the community. It misses opportunities, and it places a higher burden on our taxpayers. So I would just advocate that we really make a dedicated effort to looking at what we're missing out on by not having that role, or having part of that role refilled.
Elaine, I know it's already something you're thinking about. I think you're hearing from council that we are interested to. This could be something we prioritize in the future.
Yeah, I'm picturing that ending up on the policy priorities and strategies for 2026.
Okay, there were two, oh, go ahead.
You go for it.
I was going to say that we've covered the areas of alignment. I see Angela popped on. Are you plugging into the worksheet as we speak?
I have. I just wanted to confirm that we're adding the equity advisor, moving GMT special assessment to reserves, cutting the change to regional dispatch, and then cutting the youth interventionist?
Yes.
Okay.
Want to give us an update of the numbers?
So I've asked to share my screen, but right now the estimated percentage increase is 4.05% with those changes and an adjustment that I have automatically included for vacancy benefit savings that were realized with some of the new hires in the police department. We always budget for full family plan benefits, and not all of our new hires took that.
That's helpful. There were two other, Aurora mentioned maybe moving one traffic calming study to reserve funding, and Bryn mentioned bringing back a portion of the reduced capital funding budget. Did anyone else want to support either of those?
Even like 30,000. I asked for a quarter of what was in the proposed budget.
Thomas, I see your hand.
I would support Aurora's suggestion on the traffic calming studies, and Councillor Oakley, I would support what you said on 60,000. I think we need to make that investment. I wouldn't want it to go below 30,000.
Angela, what does that do?
1 second, I'm adding a 50% increase to the tool. So adding back 60, and you said cutting a traffic calming study?
Yeah.
4.67%.
4.67?
Yep, it's just over 3.5 cents to the tax rate.
I will say I am not on board with that change. I think staff has produced a capital plan that I do support and that our commissions have supported. And I don't want to throw money back in without further discussion and thought into where it goes.
I can tell you that it wouldn't go anywhere. It would be building capacity for a future year, though, so to speak. Because staff will be at capacity managing the plan as we presented. But it doesn't, when I say it doesn't go anywhere, I don't mean that literally. It is a strategy, a valid strategy to not make a future spike look so high.
Yeah.
And we could invest it.
Oh, I also neglected to share with you, Judy Lance, who was here earlier, she had to go because it got late. But she wanted me to share before she left that her municipal tax bill last year went up 4%, and 6% the year before, and 5% the year before that. So in 3 years, she's seen a 25% increase in just the city side of her bill. She wanted me to pass that along. And I will say, like, I think that's reflective of some of what we heard in the community survey, where people are concerned about the affordability of the tax rate. Thomas, I see your hand. You're on mute.
Right, it's late, so I forgot to mention the rapid flash beacon purchase install. For a while, we were hearing a lot about that, and then we didn't. And I realized that's because Main Street was closed and nobody was hurtling down there anymore. But I have started to hear about that again. I did almost witness somebody get hit again up there a few nights ago. Is that something that could be considered for reserves?
It is an eligible use of reserves. It is a capital purchase, and that is one of the allowable uses for reserve balances.
It could, and then the caveat is that there's a lot of demands for the reserve at the moment. So you got an updated sheet with that. The possibilities that have not come to council yet are at the bottom of that. We're hoping to cut into some of that with grant funding, but obviously that's not a guarantee either.
We can move towards the budget we want to see without making decisions about everything that reserves will be used for. If folks are interested in the RFFBs, if anyone else is too, we can bring this back as a separate item about like a discussion of what's being tracked on reserves.
Angela, for line 23, it looks like that's a full cut rather than a 50% cut.
Double check the budget, but I think that, I think they were 5,000 apiece, so we can change that.
Okay. Thomas and Bryn support increasing capital funding. I do not. Aurora, Charlie, where are you at with that?
I would
rather see the money stay to hold the youth interventionist position. And that's in part thinking about capital funding is one that we saw a huge amount, but community service was also one that voters really uplifted, at the very least in the play money activity, is that community service came in, I'm pretty sure, either at first or second. So
Yeah, it was top 2.
I want to honor that. And again, I do think like this is one of the roles where we're doing the equity work kind of like directly with people, and the other equity funding is thinking about equity work on the policy level. And so I just feel like it's important to hold those two. I'm totally fine, again, thinking about exactly what that role looks like. But I do think that it does seem to be a role that we have a need for. And I think there were some questions asked too about like how do we meet those needs while that role isn't there? So I would prioritize that over money that won't be spent this year.
Thanks. Charlie?
Do we have specifics on what we will be able to accomplish if we shift that number?
We cannot.
Like on a project by project basis, or?
In fiscal year 2026, we will not accomplish any more. It would be being able to hold on to that money for more work in the future after the big projects are less time intensive.
Thank you for explaining that. I think that Aurora captured where I'm sitting right now. Community service and public safety are the two priorities that we hear over and over and over again. So I would be inclined to reduce that amount to keep the other things in the budget that we think will benefit our residents.
Okay. Angela, can you take the capital funding back out?
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
To be clear, I'm not advocating either way. This is clearly strictly in the policy realm at this point. But I will say that, for example, sidewalks in particular are actually probably one of the most broad-ranging equity investments we can make as a municipality. So it's not that it's completely divorced from the equity conversation either.
Yeah. On the note of policy commentary, I will also say that I am uncomfortable raising taxes for savings, right? Like from a government spending perspective, we should be asking people to pay the money that we need to spend that year.
I don't know that I agree with that. I feel like it's very strategic and intentional. Like Elaine mentioned, it helps reduce the amount of the ask and the impact of a spike in future years.
Potentially, we don't know what the spike will be in future years. We're also just complaining about how we've been banking money for regional dispatch that we don't know when that's going to be used. It feels very similar to me.
It does not feel the same to me. I guess I would just disagree on that. I see that roads and sidewalks are like, we may see a news article about that and how dilapidated those are. We're hearing about residents that that really struggle with mobility issues, that are trying to access our supposedly walkable but bikeable community that cannot because it is not safe for them to do so because of the conditions of our roads and sidewalks. So I feel like in terms of equity, it is of value to everyone. In terms of strategy, I feel like it offers a greater investment than waiting on regional dispatch. So I think it's just a difference of opinion, and that's okay.
Aurora, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just want to say specifically, once more, advocating for the youth interventionists. We did just hear from the police chief that some of the crimes that are being seen with younger and younger folks. So again, that to me is like, that's an immediate need that we know of. I also acknowledge we have that continued and immediate need with having the walkable, bikeable city. But I'm comfortable with thinking, like we have all this money that are going into Main Street to make that more accessible, and having that be the priority focus for the next year, and then come back to it again in the following budget cycle. So I very much see both Christine, where you're coming from, and Bryn, where you're coming from. And I also feel like the youth interventionist right now feels the more pressing because of the equity issue, because of the interest in community service, and because of the interest in public safety. They all kind of come together with the youth interventionist. And so that's why I would prioritize it this year.
Thank you. Okay. What Angela has on the screen right now, I believe reflects where we have found alignment. We could move forward with this if folks are comfortable, unless there are more, if there's more deliberation, if anyone wants to make additional commentary.
Can we see what it would look like to add the youth interventionist back on?
$449.
$449?
I think
Yep,
so.
4.49.
What was it before? Sorry.
3.99.
3.99, yeah. 0.5%.
Angela, I have a question.
Yes.
About the line 31 and line 32. So when you are removing line 32, do you also need to remove line 31?
No, those are separate items, and in fact, if you remove both of them, a flag pops up on that check figure box telling you can't make both cuts.
Okay. Walk me through that.
So the total cost of the youth interventionist position is the $40,483. But there were two alternatives that were discussed by staff. The first was cutting the position entirely, and the second was a reduction to the position. So a reduction in hours is a cut of 11,482. You can't both reduce the hours and cut the position.
Yeah, okay. And I didn't, the way my screen was showing it, I didn't see column I. So I didn't actually see the flag when I was messing around.
Okay.
Can you change the no to a yes for line 31?
Yes. Reducing the hours from 28 to 20 a week brings it to 4.35% increase.
Yeah, and that feels to me like it's not enough of a difference to make that. I think it'd be better to see how the DLO shakes out and the plan ahead. And again, that's just my perspective for now.
How it shakes out with them included or not included? I wasn't clear on that.
Essentially, what's the structure? So getting the DLO onboarded, and then really gauging after having a full year and a half under the DOL's experience to help inform what we should do for FY27.
So cutting the hold and then revisiting it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just FYI, it would be about a year because you would be in budget discussions around this time, and she just started, so. But yes, that would be, based on that year of experience is your point. It wouldn't be a year and a half is all.
Right.
All right, Angela, can we take it back out, please?
Yep.
I will say I am comfortable with this. This is something that I feel okay about moving forward and then also having to describe to voters in the upcoming weeks.
I think it's to be expected that we don't all get what we want, so I feel like this is reasonable collaboration.
Agreed, Bryn. Thomas?
Yeah, I think this is good. I think that, you know, everything that we heard from voters, everything that we saw, 3.99 is a comfortable place to take to them.
Yeah, I mean, just for the sake of the record, I don't like cutting the youth interventionists. I've worked directly in programs that had staff members with that role on them, and it really is effective long-term for reducing crime and recidivism and community involvement amongst teens and youth that might otherwise be at risk. And on the flip side of that, we are pricing out our longstanding residents year after year, and that's kind of my bigger concern. We got to look out for the kids and the older folks at the same time. We've got to look out for everybody as best we can. And I don't love 3.99, especially when you take the years past into consideration, the way that Judy kind of laid it out for us. That experience even predates mine. So I'm prepared to vote yes on the budget that the spreadsheet represents, all things being equal. But like I said, for the public record, I'd like to state that I think that the youth interventionist position is really important. And if we can get it back online in the future, I think it'll pay itself off in dividends in social benefits for our community. Yeah.
Thanks, Charlie. And I think, Elaine, you can take this as direction that council supports keeping the revisioning of that role in the priorities.
Just missing Aurora, right?
Yeah, Aurora, can you support this?
I can support this with the extreme concern towards removing the youth interventionist, but.
Heard.
And I'll also say, like, having, you know, worked in the nonprofit sector where if you lose a position, that position's probably not coming back, or even in a school where if you lose a position, that position's probably not coming back. I'm hoping that that's not the prophecy foretold, and that we are able to reinstitute a position like that in future budgets. Yeah, just wanted to echo what Aurora said before, because it really does stand true in my experience professionally and as a volunteer.
And I would speak to that and say that I think we are, at least the council that I've worked with, is honest and intentional about having that role, acknowledging that need. I think our effort to bring the equity advisor into this budget at this point in time is a signal that when our equity director left, and we didn't continue it on the budget, we said that we would continue to work towards bringing it back. And it's not the same, and hopefully CCRPC and our partner communities also commit and see the need and the value to committing funds to that. So hopefully it actually has a more of a multiplying benefit by taking this approach. So I've seen us with the intention of indicating, like, we're making hard decisions, that's our job. We're going to make intentional effort to we see that need to bring it back. And so I at least feel like we're seeing some of that effort play out right now.
Thanks, Bryn. I would agree with that.
Yeah, I acknowledge that and appreciate that, and also hold on to the, we're not all going to get everything that we want. If only we have a tax base. But
Someday.
acknowledging, I would be, yeah, I'm comfortable moving forward with 3.99.
Okay,
Great work, council.
we have come to an agreement on what we will see for the warning and vote next week.
Angela, quick PDF that.
Yes.
Send it out.
Saved it. Saved.
Seriously,
Wait,
PDF it, so we know it's the final.
Yes, there'll be other items on the agenda too. All right, it is 10 p.m. We're at the end of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Bryn, second by Charlie. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Have a good night, all. Thank you.